Occasionally there comes among us that rare human being who sees with a clearer eye, hears with a more sensitive ear, and speaks with a stronger voice than the rest of us. In earliest tribes, he would have been the teacher and storyteller. In ancient Greece, the philosopher. In the Renaissance, the quintessential man. In our world, he was Earl Nightingale, writer, broadcaster, teacher, and perpetual student. When Earl Nightingale survived the Pearl Harbor attack on the USS Arizona, he knew he'd been spared for a reason. Returning home, he launched a radio career that soon took him to Chicago. Within a few years, he had his own 90-minute program for which he wrote, hosted, and sold the advertising. At the same time, he was running his own very successful insurance company. It was for his salespeople that he wrote what was to become his most quoted work, The Strangest Secret. In one short script, he outlined a proven plan for success, a plan so simple and yet profound that it could be summed up in just 6 words. He released it on a long-play record which sold over 1 million copies. It was the springboard to a career that blazed new trails in the field of personal motivation. Earl Nightingale was a man of the people. He knew how to take the best thoughts from the most profound thinkers in the history of mankind and translate them into our modern idiom, making each idea as fresh and meaningful as if it had been delivered with the morning paper. During the next 3 hours, you will hear Earl Nightingale reading from his book, Earl Nightingale's Greatest Discovery. Never before released on audiocassette, this is a last gift to us from a man whose name ranks with Napoleon Hill and Maxwell Maltz at the top of the list of great motivational teachers. You'll learn the strangest secret and understand the river people and the importance of goals. You'll discover the single word that means happiness, and you'll join the legions who revere this man as the Dean of Personal Development. Audio Renaissance Tapes takes great pleasure in bringing you Earl Nightingale's Greatest Discovery, recorded by the author in 1986.
I began looking for the secret of success when I was 12 years old. I found it at age 29. That was in 1950. In the spring of 1956, I was asked to put the essence of what I had learned during those many years of the most assiduous reading and research into a rather short essay. Because my working career involved both writing and broadcasting, I would then record the essay for the possible benefit of others. I began thinking about it, turning the ideas over and over in my mind. Finally, I asked myself, what would you tell your children if you found you had only a short time to live? What advice could you pass on to them that would assist them in living highly productive, very successful lives? I awakened at 4 the next morning with the answer to that question clearly in mind. I got up, put on a pot of coffee, and went into my study to put my thoughts on paper. By 10 that morning I had completed the essay. I showered and dressed, and by noon was recording my essay at CBS Recordings in Chicago. It was finished before lunch. I called what I had written and recorded The Strangest Secret. First on tape, then on a 10-inch record, The Strangest Secret became the child that was to grow into the audio recording and publishing industry. Without any effort on my part whatever, no advertising of any kind, The Strangest Secret became a national bestseller. Before very long, my good friend Dick Hutter, then head of Columbia Records in Chicago, told us we had earned a gold record for sales exceeding 1 million copies, and today, as I write this introduction in the early fall of 1986, The Strangest Secret still sells, and the many recorded programs for which it paved the way are now selling to hundreds of thousands of people all over the free world in the form of tape cassettes. I found the secret for which I had searched so long and diligently in a book. Books had become and remain to this day one of my overriding loves. My home is filled with them. They form double rows on the shelves of my study because we don't have enough bookshelves to properly display them. And while nothing can take the place of a tape cassette for a person commuting to and from work in an automobile, books will no doubt remain, for centuries perhaps, the world's great source of knowledge and enjoyment. And now it's time to look back over the intervening years. It's time to revisit The Strangest Secret and examine or re-examine our journey into meaning. And now I must give very special thanks to Diana, my wife, without whose love and laughter and sound thinking and perseverance this book would not have been written at all. She filled my life with love, laughter, and sunshine at a very critical time, and she continues to do so to my everlasting joy. And now, let me thank you, without whom nothing happens, nothing at all. As my old friend Red Motley always said, nothing happens until somebody sells something. In order to fully enjoy prosperity and its accompanying sense of achievement, one needs to have known poverty and an environment in which daily survival is the purpose of life. As a youngster, I didn't know anything about a sense of achievement, but I was all too aware of being very poor. It didn't seem to bother the other kids, but it bothered me. What made it all the more exasperating to me as a boy of 12 was to be poor in Southern California, where there seemed to be so many who were rich. In fact, to me, anyone who had an automobile, an electric refrigerator, and wall-to-wall carpeting was rich, and the children of such people seemed to me to be fortunate indeed. I decided to find out why some people were rich, while so very many of us were poor. The year was 1933. The bottom of the Great Depression. Millions were unemployed. My two brothers and I were fortunate. Although our father had disappeared in search of greener pastures, our mother never missed a day at her WPA sewing factory job. Her earnings, I recall, were $55 a month, which produced survival. We lived for a while in Tent City, behind the old Mariner Apartments on the waterfront in Long Beach, California. What makes the difference, I ask myself? Why are some people well off financially and others poor? Why are some so well paid, while others are so poorly paid? What's the difference? What's going on here? I tried asking the adults who live in our neighborhood and soon discovered they didn't know any more than I did. In fact, I made what was to me an astonishing discovery. The adults in our neighborhood didn't know anything at all. They were pitifully uneducated, rudimentary, driven by instinct, other-directed. My mother had many endearing qualities. One was her unfailing good cheer. Another was her love of books. She haunted the public library, and my fondest memory of her is seeing her eating her oatmeal and milk early in the morning before dawn under that dangling, naked, underpowered light bulb with a book propped up in front of her. She loved travel books especially. Never able to travel herself, she explored the earth from pole to pole with her books on travel and adventure. I'm sure it helped save her sanity during those hard years. She was an attractive woman, still young, but completely dedicated to the raising of her boys. Her books and our battered radio were her only entertainment. She read the books on the long Pacific Electric train rides to and from work in Los Angeles, and after we boys had gone to bed at night. On weekends, after cleaning and doing the laundry, her books again filled her world with exciting travel and high adventure. Later in life, I realized that she never had to stand in a sweltering customs shed, or see her luggage disappear into 3 Italian taxis, or struggle with a foreign language or currency. Yet she traveled from one end of the earth to the other, and was intimate with the most remote places on the planet. That she was able to do so without ever leaving Los Angeles County was a tribute to the excellent public library system. It didn't cost her a dime. And so it was to the Long Beach Public Library that I went, seeking the elusive secret of success. I didn't know where to look amongst those thousands of titles, but I felt sure it was there somewhere. It seemed to me that if anyone had ever figured it out, he surely would have written a book about it. And as I began my search, I soon found myself sidetracked into the world of the most exciting fiction, the Hardy Boys, the great mind-expanding stories of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and the westerns of Zane Grey. Then came the fascinating stories of the Plains Indians by Stanley Vestal, and before I knew it, I was as addicted to books as my mother. I learned about the importance of honesty and personal integrity and courage, and of believing in what is right and being willing to fight for it. I know that it was my early love affair with books that resulted in my getting a better-than-average education. Later, as World War II loomed on the horizon, I left school and enlisted in the Marine Corps. But I continued my studies. I read everything I could lay my hands on. I made two decisions that were to guide the remainder of my life. The first was to discover the secret of success. The second was to become a writer. I loved books and wanted to write them myself. Toward the end of the war, I found myself back in the States and working as an instructor at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It was driving between the base and nearby Jacksonville that I noticed a radio station under construction and decided to apply for an announcing job, working nights and weekends. I was auditioned and hired. Sitting before the microphone at that small radio station, WJNC, Jacksonville, North Carolina, was the beginning of my radio career. The owner-manager, Lester Gould, and I became good friends. I took to broadcasting like nothing I'd ever done before in my life. I was in my element, and now, more than 40 years later, I'm still at it. My desire to write did not lessen, and gradually I began planning for the day when I would write my own radio programs. My reading and search for the secret of success continued without let-up. I studied the world's great religions. I found myself especially fascinated with philosophy and psychology. But it wasn't until I was 29 and working for CBS in Chicago that one weekend the enlightenment finally came. While reading, it suddenly dawned upon me that I'd been reading the same truth over and over again for many years. I'd read it in the New Testament, in the sayings of Buddha, in the writings of Lao Tzu, in the words of Emerson. And all of a sudden, there they were, the words in the proper order that I'd been looking for 15 years, the astonishing truth that we become what we think about. It was as though I was suddenly immersed in a bright light. Of course, I remember sitting bolt upright at the simplicity of it all. That was what Ortega was talking about when he reminded us that we're the only creatures on Earth born into a natural state of disorientation with our world. It had to be because we're the only creatures with the godlike power to create our own worlds. And we do. We do create our own worlds all the years of our lives. We become what we think about most of the time, and if we don't think, which seemed to have been the principal problem of the people back in my old Long Beach, California neighborhood, we don't become anything at all. There it was, just 6 words. There are more than 600,000 words in the English language, but those were the 6 I'd searched for in that particular order since age 12. 15 years it had taken to see the obvious. How could we become anything else? Our minds are the steering mechanisms of our lives, and each of us thinks differently, who does much thinking at all. There at last was the secret of success or of failure, or of something in between. Each of us is sentenced to become what he or she thinks about. Our big brains are what make us human. How we use them decides our destiny. Our minds are the gyro compasses of our lives, and once set, that's where we're going until they're reset. I was amazed that I had not seen the answer before, but delighted nonetheless that I was at last in possession of the key. I'd made up my mind to find the secret of success and become a successful writer. I'd found the secret, although the fact that it was a secret to so many was strange indeed. Now, to make my living by writing my own radio programs demanded only that I resign a very good job with CBS and strike out on my own. I did both in March of 1950, and I've been on an unbroken upward curve ever since. Those 6 simple words, in that order, revolutionized my life. And I had found them clearly spelled out, just as I had so desperately hoped as a child of 12, not in some hoary ancient tome, but in a book titled Think and Grow Rich, by a man named Napoleon Hill. Later, through my friendship with W. Clement Stone, the Chicago insurance tycoon, I met and got to know Napoleon Hill. I'll never forget our meeting. It took place at the old Edgewater Beach Hotel on Chicago's North Shore. I remember seeing this very thin, smiling old gentleman coming down a curving marble staircase. As he approached me, he held out his hand and said simply, I'm Napoleon. I recall fighting back the urge to respond with something like, "How do you do? I'm Alexander the Great." But this was the man who had managed to extract from the major philosophies and religions of the world, and the life stories of dozens of America's most successful people, the 6 words that represented, more than any other factor, why people live the lives they do. He had articulated the secret I had been searching for so long. Growth and increase, and life abundant, are the way of nature. It should be inherent in each of us to desire more life and more of what life has to offer. That's not wrong. It's perfectly natural and the way it should be. The winners in the world are those men and women who plan it that way. They're people with a vision of the future that is sufficiently important to them that they're willing to do what is necessary to arrive in the midst of their vision. So let's ask that question. What is your vision of your future? We become what we think about. If you know what you want to become, you'll become it. Visualization is a force of incalculable power. As the Calcutta poet Rabindranath Tagore reminds us, faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. We grow into our expectations. It's too bad that so few manage to muster expectations more in keeping with their true potential. A business executive leaves his home to go to the office. It's early summer and a beautiful morning. He drives his late model, expensive car, shining from frequent washings, out of the garage, sweeps down the drive to the shaded street, and turns toward town. On both sides of the street, fine homes can be seen, their lawns and landscaping well cared for, their paint bright, windows sparkling clean in the early morning light. Our business executive drinks in the sight. Beautiful, he says to himself. What a lovely morning. All is well. His world is in order. His fine car makes hardly a sound as it moves along the clean, orderly street. The neighborhood reflects this executive and the people in his socio-economic group who own the houses up and down the street. It's as natural for our business executive and his wife to choose the home in which they live and pay the price for it as it is for any family anywhere. They think and live in those terms. The neighborhood reflects them, their education and aspirations, their levels of accomplishment, and costs them no more from a percentage of income standpoint than do the homes and neighborhoods of anyone else in the country. And, this is important, once acquired, that home and neighborhood and society represent constant reinforcement of themselves and their place in the scheme of things. Now, they may move further upwards or sideways, but the chances of their moving backwards, or let's say downwards, are so small as to be negligible. Their environment is a mirror of their current place on the human achievement ladder. You are, at this moment, the sum total of your thoughts to this point in your life, and so am I, and so is that man across the street, and there, that woman going into the supermarket. Watch them, study them, look at their faces. They're the most interesting creatures on the planet, and the most charged with possibilities. But do they know that? Do they know that their daily lives are mirrors of their thinking? Do they know about the subject we're discussing here? Alas, no. Most of them do not. Most of them are simply keeping pace with the slice of their socio-economic pyramid they have unconsciously chosen as their lot in life. They do not know that by thinking in new directions, which incidentally has been called the definition of genius, they can bring new directions into their lives. Most of them are simply marking time as though they have a non-cancelable contract with life. How can we rise above our more egregious mistakes if we just mark time? Let's do it better than it's been done before. Let's find our partner in the freest, richest land on earth and do something wonderful with this holiday on earth we've been mysteriously granted. Here's where our individual and original DNA helices come into the picture. Each of us is an original whether we like it or not. Each of us has a genetic profile unlike any other person that ever has or ever will appear on this planet. That's true because no one else in the universe has our particular set of ancestors, nor our exact genetic mix. Each of us might think of himself or herself as a painting. Each of our parents, and each of our parents' thousands of ancestors has placed a small daub of paint on that painting. After you were born, your environment began adding to the painting that is you, and it was different from your brothers and sisters. That composite work determines the way we tend to think. What you can do and what you want are different from what I can do and what I want, and different in some ways from what everyone else can do and want. That's what keeps everybody from wanting and doing the same thing. Our rich genetic inheritance gives each of us a wide range of options, and our free society gives us free choice. The better the environment in which we're raised, or the better our education as young people, and the better the education of our parents, the greater the spectrum of our options to which we will be exposed during our formative years. But in any case, chosen at random, the odds are about 95-5. That ideal background is not ours. Someone once wrote, "If you suffer without succeeding, it's so that someone may succeed after you. If you succeed without suffering, it's because someone suffered for you. But there is no success without suffering." I think the word suffering used in that context is meant to mean striving, making the grade to a new higher plateau. In every family of affluence, someone, somewhere, had to climb from a lower level to a higher level. Even British royalty had a poor striver somewhere in the past if one goes back far enough. Old money simply means that several generations have lived in the lap of luxury because some character back there had a good idea and worked his rear end off, and probably had a wonderful time doing it, to move the family from the poor neighborhood to the rich neighborhood. The most important information I ever learned in my life is that we become what we think about. What do you think about? What's your goal? Can you write it out in a single sentence? One goal at a time, please. If you have more than one, or if you'd like some intermediate goals which lead toward a large goal, list them separately, and number them 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. This brings order to your life and purpose to your days. You are today the sum total of your thoughts to this point in your life. Are you pleased with your present place in the world? Yes or no? If your answer is yes, what's your next port of call? If your answer is no, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to start thinking about? Now, we control what we think about, and by so doing, each of us tells, to an altogether unsuspected extent, his and her own fortune. Our world tells us the truth about ourselves. It reveals what we've learned, what we've done, and how much we've served. The old saying, "What you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying," is therefore apt. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me. Go do it. I've always felt glibness a serious danger to accomplishment. Like a steam valve, as we talk at great length about what we're going to do, we seem to lose just that much steam when it actually comes to doing it. Another cliché puts it well: actions speak louder than words. A couple traveling in India noticed a pleasant-appearing young Indian man sitting by a bridge near their hotel. They saw him sitting in that one spot day after day. Becoming curious, they asked him one day why he just sat there by the bridge all day, every day. He replied, "I happen to believe in reincarnation. I believe that I've lived many times before, and that I will have many lives following this one. So this life, I'm sitting out." Well, he had a plan and was engaged in following it. How about you? On occasion I've been questioned by serious people who ask, "You say that we become what we think about, but what about people who choose dreams much too large for their inherent capacities?" Well, discounting serious neurosis or outright psychosis, it's been my experience that far from choosing goals too great for our inherent capacities to reach, we tend to underestimate ourselves and set them much too low, especially in the beginning. There seems to be a natural human tendency to take the accomplishments of others in stride, but doubt the accomplishments we ourselves can reach. We've lived in our own skin so long we tend to take ourselves for granted. We tend to underestimate our potential for growth and achievement. If you have difficulty in deciding that which you would most like to do, here's a little game you can play that might help you decide. Let's pretend that you're financially independent, you have a very good income, and don't have to concern yourself about it. It's Monday morning. You wake up feeling great. You can do anything you want to do. What would you most enjoy doing? And what would you most enjoy doing on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday? Write it down. Oh, that couldn't be, someone will say. I'd most enjoy sailing a boat and working around boats. If that's what you would most enjoy doing, and you know that from having done it a great deal, then there's your key. There's something in the boat business for you. And there are 50,000 parts to the boat business or any other business. It's a big industry. And if it's your thing, go to it. Whatever your mind most naturally turns to, that's probably the key to an enjoyable and productive future. Examine it. Write it down. Explore it from every possible angle. There's opportunity there, worlds of it. We do not seriously choose goals that are beyond our inherent capacity to achieve. Our very choice is determined by what we are, our genetic set, we might say. But in doing that which we most enjoy, we will very probably make our most significant contribution to society. And it is by the contribution we make to society that our rewards are determined. As you sow, so shall you reap. The more one thinks about that great truth, the more one would like to see it emblazoned on the walls of schoolrooms, boardrooms, the agencies of government, and as a periodic television message along with radio spots and appropriate outdoor advertising. Anyone who's been an adult for any appreciable length of time can assess the extent and quality of his or her sowing by the simple expedient of taking inventory of his or her harvest. Our harvest at any point in our lives is the total input from our world. It is represented by our family, our spiritual life, the friends we've acquired, the attitude of our co-workers toward us, the place in which we live, the things we own, and, of course, our financial return. Our harvest, at any given time, is the total of what we have accumulated and are receiving from the world in which we're participating, and it is, of course, dependent upon the extent and quality of our efforts and service. As we sow, so we reap. Cause and effect. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. You needn't bother to look for exceptions to that rule. There aren't any. The great law does not deviate for anyone. If your grandfather left you $300 million after taxes, you would still be subject to the great law of cause and effect. You would be happy or miserable, or a combination of both, and you would be successful or unsuccessful as a person, dependent solely on the causes you set in motion. As you would sow, so would you reap all the years of your life. If you sow friendship, you will receive friendship in return. If you sow love, you will receive love in return. If you sow that which is good and beneficial to all concerned, your harvest will be good and beneficial to you. But in all cases, it is we who must set the law in motion, or in cases where the law is set in motion by others, it will be our response as a participant that will keep it going or stop it dead in its tracks as far as we are personally concerned. I've long used the metaphor of the wood stove. We must supply the wood and strike the match if we desire heat in return. To sit in front of a cold stove and demand that it supply heat first before we'll take any action is to sit in front of a cold stove forever. A what's-in-it-for-me attitude attempts to preempt heat from our wood stove before bothering to supply the wood and light the fire. People say, "I need a job," or "I need work." Here, once again, we have the cold stove metaphor, the childish acquisitiveness. How different it would be if the same people said, "I know I can be of service to the people of this community. Now, what can I do best that will do the best possible job of serving these people and still be a service that I'll enjoy providing?" Here we have the wood and the striking match, at least in inchoate form. We're on the right track. The distinguished Dr. Albert Einstein was once asked, "Doctor, why are we here?" He turned to his questioner in surprise that he had asked so elementary a question and replied, "We're here to serve other people." Of course, we're here to serve. Everything that we ever receive and from which we will derive special pleasure and joy will come to us as a result of our having served. It's the key to a happy marriage and a happy family. It's the key to a happy organization of any kind. Here's the answer to the question that bothered me as a youngster. Why do some people earn more money than others when they work about the same amount of time? In fact, there's a small percentage of people whose earnings bear little or no relation to the time spent working. Why is that? It has to do with the nature of their service, coupled with the ancient law of supply and demand. A man with the talent to pitch 20 or more winning baseball games or bat over 300 is going to be paid great sums of money during the time he can perform such game-winning feats. That's because there are very few like him. Every team wants him, and he can demand top dollar. He's a star. He entertains millions of fans. Entertains equals serves. For many years, and perhaps earns a place in the Hall of Fame. Lloyd Webber writes hit musicals. He wrote the Cats score and the music for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Evita. So he has a 67-acre Berkshire estate sporting a 40-room mansion and a Mayfair London duplex and more money than he knows what to do with. He's entertained, served, millions, and will no doubt continue to do so as he makes his astonishing talent available to the world. Turn what you have into something hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people can use and or enjoy, and you may purchase fabulous personal things too. As we sow, so shall we reap. If our sowing serves great numbers of people, our harvest will reflect that service. What do you love to do? What can you do that will earn you a lot of money even when you're playing golf or out on your boat? What do you love to do that can serve others without your having to be there personally? How can you beat the personal service requirement of so many jobs? If being a first-class waiter in a first-class restaurant brings you into daily contact with friends you've made over the years and keeps you active and young and you love it, stay with it. Take good care of your feet and enjoy. Nothing is more satisfying than first-class people doing first-class jobs. We need all we can get, and we'll pay them well. You can be in a personal service line of service, or you can produce something that will make you wealthy or provide you with an excellent income, whether you continue to work or not. The choice is yours. Yes, the choice is yours to make. That's your part of the bargain. You don't have to have the unique talent of a 20-game-winning pitcher or a 300 hitter or the special talent of a Lloyd Webber to become a millionaire. What is it that you do best? What do you most enjoy doing? Chances are there's a yawning opportunity lurking in there somewhere. I found my specialty. Now, what's yours? That's your part of the bargain. That's your responsibility. But your rewards all the years of your life will be in precise proportion to your service. You are here to serve others just as they serve you. How can you maximize your service? How can you serve not only your regular customers, but perhaps the people in your profession as well? I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and saw that life was duty. I acted, and behold, duty was joy. That little poem by Rabindranath Tagore, the Calcutta poet, is what it's all about. The successful man or woman is the person who can say, "This is the goal I'm working toward, and this is the way I'm going to get there. And when I reach that goal, I'll have others by that time, and I'll use this same system, improved by then, to reach those goals as well." Can you say that? If not, you still have some in-depth thinking and self-examination to work on, and don't despair. That kind of personal maturity comes to different people at different stages of their lives. Let me tell you how a friend of mine and his wife, working together, became millionaires. They began by rebuilding automobile engines. They both worked at it, and Earl took care of the growing family. But the deeply embedded grease in their hands became a problem. They couldn't get them clean, especially Earl, so they began experimenting, trying to solve a problem with different materials that would clean away the deeply embedded black grease and not destroy her hard-working hands at the same time. They began experimenting with different kinds of cleaners and different kinds of creams for the protection of skin. And one day, after many experiments, they managed to put together a product that did the job. It actually cleaned the hands and kept them soft and comfortable. It worked beautifully for both of them. And so they let a friend with the same problem try their concoction. It worked for him too, and he and his wife raved about the product. Mervyn and Beryl called the product Flight and began selling it all over South Africa. That's where my friends live. They were wonderfully successful, although they had to come up with an entirely new way of distributing and selling their product. In each town in the country, they recruited young women to call on service stations and garages, wherever people worked with dirty machinery. The young women would demonstrate the product and take orders. They were happy with their commissions, the customers were happy with the new product, and Beryl and Mervyn, who were now mixing the stuff by the ton, were happy with their profits. They became so successful that a big cleansing product company bought their company from them for 5 million rand. That was about $5 million at the time. So Mervyn and Beryl deposited their newfound wealth and went about the business of raising their 5 children. But the big cleansing product company was too institutionalized to bother with a sales force of young women that demanded personal attention and very special know-how. After 2 or 3 years, its directors gave the company back to Mervyn and Beryl, saying they couldn't be bothered. So Mervyn and Beryl got the 5 million rand and their company back. They're now in the process of expanding their product overseas. Mervyn and Beryl Nyland and their 5 fine children are among the nicest people we know. Examine what you do every day. There are more opportunities presently lurking in your present work, regardless of what that work may be, than you could develop in a lifetime. If you're a janitor, can you make a better broom or mop, a cleaning product? What do you see as you go about your work that could stand improvement? How can you multiply your service? It's often the multiplication of what we do that is the key to increasing our service rewards factor. Once my radio program was heard on one radio station in the United States. As I write this, my daily commentary, Our Changing World, is heard on hundreds of radio stations throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, South Africa, the Bahamas, and dozens of other places. Now, instead of talking only with the radio listeners in one market area, I talk to them in more than 1,000. Take what you do, what you most enjoy doing, and find a way to multiply it. You needn't hurry. A slow, steady growth is best. If you work at a salaried job, what is it about your work, some facet of your work, that can be developed into a multiplied service? What do you know that others need and want to know? What's your hobby? Think, but think with a pen and pad of paper. Keep paper with you or near you at all times. You'll want to start writing down your ideas. Remember, your rewards are now and must always be in proportion to your service. Find ways, good, solid, healthy ways to increase your service, and your increased rewards will take care of themselves. What percentage of the people do you believe have this service rewards idea straight in their minds? Would you say 1%? That might be a generous estimate. Yet how many people are familiar with the biblical statement, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap"? 95%? About that. How many people believe it's literally true in our lives? That is much more than a happy saying from the Bible. That's right, they don't think about it in those terms. But the unbreakable law it describes is at work every moment of every day of our lives, cause and effect. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. He worked all his life, but never had anything to show for it. You ever heard that comment? I have. As a youngster, I heard it often. He apparently achieved a kind of parity between what he was doing for a living and the living it was paying for. His service was limited, and it limited his income. It apparently satisfied him. He did nothing to change it. Our housekeeper once commented that her husband couldn't understand why, no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't get ahead financially. It turned out that he was a mechanic. He worked on one car at a time for 8 hours a day. How much can such work be worth? How much can each customer be charged? Then there's the overhead, the cost of doing business. By the time the mechanic is paid, it's true. It's going to be very difficult for him to get ahead financially. But he chose that line of work. And think of the things he chose not to do before he went to work as a mechanic. Sometimes he chose to drop out of school. He chose not to work out a plan that would result in his owning his own business. Not that that means he would have got ahead financially necessarily. He chose to take the path of least resistance every step of the way, and is apparently quite willing now to work as a mechanic. Mervyn Nyland was a mechanic also. He rebuilt engines, remember? And then began experimenting with ways to keep his hands clean and in good shape physically. Both our housekeeper's husband and Mervyn Nyland reap the harvest their sewing produces. One is poor, the other's a millionaire. I remember an old poem I read as a youngster, gobbling up books looking for answers. It began, "I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more." I don't remember the rest, but that's not important. What's important is that life will pay us for what we bargain for, and if we play for peanuts, we're going to have to eat peanuts. How can I multiply my service? How can I multiply my service to those I have chosen of my own free will to serve? That's my task, my responsibility. But I must remember that my rewards all the years of my life will be in exact proportion to my service. If my service is sharply limited, my income will be sharply limited. If I can expand and multiply my service, my harvest will be multiplied accordingly. Service rewards. That's the way it works. We can work with the system or against it, but it remains the same. And it's beautiful when we begin to work with it. It's limitless, really. We're the limiters. We're the governors on the system. If it's held back, we do the holding. Give the people what they want. Give them a quality product, and they'll buy from you. People have needs, and they have wants. Their needs are few. Their wants are limitless. Give them what they need or want, and they will reward you accordingly. Fail to give them what they need or want, and they'll put you out of business. Service rewards. No exceptions. A river or a goal? There are two categories of very successful people. There are those I call the river people, and those that might be labeled the goal people. River people are those fortunate few who find themselves born to perform a specific task. They're usually well aware of just what that task is while they're still quite young. They're not interested in doing anything else. They're born to spend their lives in great rivers of the most absorbing interest, and they throw themselves into those rivers wholly. Mozart and Leonardo da Vinci were river people. There are hundreds of thousands of river people living today, and they can be found in all fields. There are finest musicians and performers in all the arts. They're writers, scientists, lawmakers. They can be found in every profession. Dr. Al Roten, the brilliant microneurosurgeon at the University of Florida, comes to mind as I record this subject. He heads the teaching center, and he performs brilliant, life-saving surgical procedures. I saw a dozen or so physicians there from all over the world, sitting around a circular table, peering through powerful microscopes and operating on the brains of mice in order to perfect their skills in microneurosurgery. They use instruments specially designed for such fine work. Tiny, delicate forceps, sutures so fine they're nearly invisible to the naked eye, and miniature scalpels. Their movements are barely perceptible as they work on nerves and tiny blood vessels. Dr. Roten can be seen in the halls of the hospital from early in the morning until very late at night. One Sunday afternoon we were taking a walk, and I asked him why he didn't have a high-priced practice in New York or Beverly Hills. He walked along in silence for a few minutes, then he said, "Where I get my satisfaction out of all this, Earl, is knowing that somewhere in the world every day people are getting better medicine, better surgery, because of what we're doing here." His work is his life, and vice versa. I'm afraid his family's not seen too much of him over the years, and that's true of all river people. Henry Royce was such a person. His obsession was to build the world's finest and quietest motor car. At the time he started work on what was to become the world standard for excellence in automotive design and manufacture early in the 20th century, the automobile engine sounded like a modern clothes dryer filled with empty cans punctuated with gunshots. Royce was convinced that the parts of an internal combustion engine could be so finely manufactured to such exacting tolerances and so perfectly lubricated that the noise of their operation would be, or could be, barely perceptible to people standing nearby. He stalked about the plant in a nearly constant march. He would not take the time to eat, so a boy was hired to follow him around with a sandwich and a glass of milk. When Royce became sleepy, he would lie on a cot in the plant and take a nap. Then he was up again, examining everything. One day he overheard one of his engineers saying to a workman, "That's good enough," and Royce hit the ceiling. "It is not good enough," he shouted. "It's never good enough. We strive for perfection. Now, since that's impossible, it's never good enough. Find a way to make it better." I once toured the Rolls-Royce plant in London, and I was astonished by the care taken with imperfections that were invisible to me. Such care and dedication stood England in good stead during the Battle of Britain, when Rolls-Royce was turning out engines for Spitfire fighters. A beautiful stained-glass window over the entrance to the company's headquarters was given to the company by a grateful nation. Royce's unrelenting dedication is typical of the river person, and the great products and services of the world are usually due to such a person. Eastman of Kodak, Henry Ford, who accepted the challenge, which was at the time thought to be impossible, to produce a motor car for the working classes. Henry Ford did not invent the assembly line. Eli Whitney had done that with the manufacture of rifles, but Ford was the first to apply the system to the manufacture of automobiles. His genius for finding ways to cut costs and still produce a hard-working product was legendary. He raised the salaries of workers to a mind-boggling $5 a day, another feat never before equaled in the history of the Industrial Revolution. One of Ford's problems was that once he came up with a revolutionary idea, he was irrevocably fixed on it. The passage of time and changing economic conditions could not bring about changes in his way of thinking. But Henry Ford was a river person, and I'm sure you can think of many others. Perhaps you're a river person. Things aren't as simple and clear-cut as they once were. There's such a welter of possibilities, so many options. It can be difficult for a person to find his main interest in life. If we haven't found the work for which we're best fitted, there's usually an unresolved feeling of discontent with what we're doing. If we were true to ourselves, we'd say, "I know this work is not the work for which I'm designed," and begin to explore in our spare time other lines of endeavor. Too often we're guided more by the pay scale than by a genuine feeling of interest in the work itself. Whatever our true line of work turns out to be, with the kind of 100% dedication and commitment we would give to it, it could produce anything we could possibly want. Sir William Osler, the great physician, was a river person, and he was speaking to other possible river people when he said, "Throw away, in the first place, all ambition beyond that of doing the day's work well. Find your way into work in which there's an enjoyment of it, and all shadows of annoyance seem to flee away. Let each day's work absorb your energy and satisfy your wildest ambition. Success in the long run depends on endurance and perseverance. All things come to him who has learned to labor and wait, whose talents develop in the still and quiet years of unselfish work." End quote. If you find yourself saying, "I must not be a river person," wait, think about it. Examine your life, your wants, your dreams, your daydreams, your visions, and look for a consistent key, a way in which you like to see yourself doing some particular thing as a form of work or service. A consistent daydream is often the projection of our inner intelligence trying to tell us what we should be doing. It may be that you're already in the general area you want to be in, but just haven't seen it in the light of its true possibilities. Discontented actors have found their rivers in directing, discontented salespeople in sales management, and vice versa. Every industry has within it hundreds, if not thousands, of possibilities. There's advertising and art and public relations and purchasing. The list goes on. But keep this in mind. If it's the right work for you, chances are you found yourself fooling around with it in your spare time in some way, or reading about it, or doodling about it, or visiting it in your free time. Look for a consistent interest. If you find it, you may have found your river. A river in carpentry is just as richly satisfying and fraught with the same possibilities as any other calling. If we cannot find a special interest in a particular line of work, then we no doubt should become goal people. There are those of us who seem to be able to do with equal facility and with equal interest and enjoyment many things. There are, for example, professional business executives who simply love the challenge of business. They can take an ailing company and within a few years raise it to a plateau among the leaders. What the company produces in the way of product or service doesn't seem to make very much difference. Lee Iacocca was known as an automobile man because of his many successful years at the Ford Motor Company. As such, he was asked to take over the Chrysler Corporation when it was in danger of complete collapse. That he did in a masterful, skillful way, that he risked his professional reputation in the process, was an indication of his confidence. The rest of the story is history, but Lee Iacocca might have done just as well taking over a corporation manufacturing toys or copiers or computers or whatever. Iacocca is a goal person. Now many will ask, well, why set goals at all? Why not just take things as they come and do your best with what you've been given to do? That been-given business is often a way of saying you stumbled into a chance opportunity for work and simply stayed there. A goal gives a picture to the human subconscious. Everyone has goals, whether he or she will admit it or not. Whatever you want to bring about in your life represents a goal. That dress in I. Magnan's window, that sports car, the condominium apartment in Florida, the home in Martha's Vineyard, the man or woman you want to date. Wants are goals. Without a goal, we're much like the man with a boat and nowhere to go. Goals give us the drive and energy we need to remain on the track long enough for their accomplishment. Like the captain of the ship about to leave port, we should be able to tell anyone our next port of call, and perhaps the one after that. If you've done much traveling at sea, you were perhaps surprised in the beginning by how slowly most large ships seem to move through the water. At a time when it's common for us to drive at 60 and 70 miles per hour and eat our lunch while tearing through the sky at 600 miles per hour, a ship pulling away from the dock and heading for a distant port at 20 knots may seem painfully slow indeed. But the ship moves steadily, 24 hours a day, always on course, and the cumulative effect of such relentless singleness of purpose delivers us at the next port of call in a surprisingly short time. One day we raise the distant shore, and soon we're in the harbor with mission accomplished. Now, after refueling, perhaps, and the scheduled stop, a new port of call must be determined. People with goals on which they've set their hearts and minds are always moving toward those goals. Even while we sleep, our deep minds are apparently working on the project. That's why we often awaken early in the morning with a solution to a problem that offered repeated resistance to our conscious attempts to solve it, clearly and simply in mind. It's interesting, and often quite astonishing, how people with goals tend to live longer than people without them. It's as though they can extend their lives simply because they have something to do. It must be the interest that lends vitality and energy to their lives. Cervantes wrote, "The journey is better than the inn." It's good to rest at the inn after a long journey, just as it's good for our ship to tie up at the dock for a few days' rest after a long sea voyage. But Cervantes was certainly right. The journey is better than the inn. Because the journey is life and experience. It puts us in the way of new interests and the most astonishing synchronicity. When a person knows where he or she is going and is engaged in getting there, the most amazing coincidences begin to take place. It's like reading something by Victor Hugo, in that the coincidences often take on the most outrageous appropriateness. Just as we're stumped, that one person with the answers happens along, or someone sends us the one book that has exactly the answer we're looking for. When we know where we're going and occupied on our journey, it seems as though all the forces, whatever they are, come to our aid. We're helped along by invisible as well as visible sources. This is not to say that we encounter nothing but smooth sailing. On the contrary, there's that door, of course, which is like a members-only sign outside an exclusive club. It seems to exist to prevent all but the 100%ers from gaining entrance to the winner's circle. Perseverance. Dogged, unflagging, repeatedly rejected perseverance is the answer, of course. And when we've set our heart and mind on something that is so important to us, we can generate that kind of persistence. The first step of the successful goal person is commitment. The person who's 100% committed to the achievement of a goal is quite willing to take whatever intermediate steps are necessary. The bridges are burned. There's no escape route on which to come tiptoeing back when things get rough. Commitment. 100%. When that happens, the goal is as good as accomplished, and you'll have fun and great experiences on the road to its achievement. In fact, the goal itself may come as an anticlimax, demanding the immediate setting of a new goal. People who know such a committed person and are privy to the goal also know that the person will reach it. They become silent and affirmative partners and often set in motion events that will help along the way. As we work to bring a difficult long-range goal into reality, we gradually grow into the kind of people to whom such a goal is a natural thing. That's because before we can do something, we must be something. And to me, this way we have of growing to fit the work, the social situation involved. The embodiment of superior achievement is a mind-boggling wonder. We actually become what we think about. And the key to it all is that it is each one of us who must do the thinking, and each of us has his own governor tied to his or her own innate capabilities. I could no more do the things the Ayacoca does than those pelicans that fly past my balcony every afternoon could fly backwards. And I don't set the same goals Ayacoca sets. I cannot set your goals any more than you can set mine. You're the only person alive who can set your goals, although others may inspire you from time to time to do more than you might have done without their encouragement. Encouragement is the function of a good leader, a coach, a mentor, or manager. The point I want to make here is that we all have basic and inherent genetic differences. I knew a corporal in the Marine Corps during World War II who could perform the most astonishing tricks with his mind, and whenever some kind of test was ordered, he easily outscored everyone else on the base, if not the entire Marine Corps. Both his mother and father were full professors at leading universities. He came from a long line of people with towering IQs, and, as a result, could think rings around most of the rest of us and do mathematical problems in his head that we couldn't have done under any circumstances. He had inherited a 16-cylinder brain, and our species needs such people for the special tasks they perform. There are also a lot of 8, 6, and 4-cylinder brains, and we need those too. And the most fascinating point of all of this is that regardless of the genetic equipment we've been handed, the goals we set and invariably reach when they're truly our goals and not the goals of a parent or acquaintance meet our desires perfectly. We're quite happy with them. Now that's why I've stressed that you examine your daydreams for signs of a repetitive picture. It may be the aiming point for the present. Just as coughing is the only way the lungs can beg a smoker to stop destroying them. Our daydreams, or habitual visions, are often the way our inherent genetic mix is put together, and those dreams and visions are trying to tell us which way to go. They're often the projection of our inner voice, and that inner voice is based on very sound judgment about our true inherent capacities. The thing we must put aside in order to fulfill our unique possibilities is conformity. We all conform in hundreds of ways, even those of us who feel we've gone our own individual way in the world, who have lived more or less as free and independent spirits, are conformists to an extent that would no doubt surprise us if each of those ways was listed and printed out for us. But we need to recognize that there are ways in which we must not conform, and we need to recognize the fact that the tendency to conform to the standards of others without question is insidious and ever-present. There's a human tendency, no doubt acquired and strengthened in childhood, to believe that whatever people in significant numbers are doing must be correct, or so many of them wouldn't be doing it. That statement may never be spoken or thought of in just that way, but I'm sure you know what I mean. When I was a youngster, popular things were believed to be best. Florsheim shoes were thought to be the best, as were Hart, Schaffner, and Marx suits. Not that I ever owned either during that time. My father, and no doubt hundreds of thousands in similar situations, felt that Pontiac was the best car, but earlier it had been Buick. These were popular fads, which, unless one conformed to them, one simply wasn't in, or later hip. To flash the proper label indicated that you were knowledgeable about what to wear and drive. That was before Father took off for greener pastures. The fact is, they were all wrong. The popular, heavily advertised brands were fine and suited the great masses of people quite handily, but they really were not the best that money could buy. The great majority of people seldom enjoy the best of anything. They don't drink the best scotch or bourbon, wear the best clothes or shoes, or drive the best cars. The best is never the most popular. Now, I mention these things to establish the importance of questioning the things we do. Do we do them because they're what everybody else is doing, or because we've come to the conclusion that they're best for us and our personal journey into meaning? To young people, the need to belong is paramount. The group is the thing, and to be a member of the group, quite sufficient. So sufficient that one is quite willing to lose every vestige of individuality and take on the trappings, speech, and habits of the group. Oh, God, just let me belong is their unspoken prayer, and that's fine. It's their first true identity outside their families, and it's important to them. That it takes them far afield of what their parents traditionally expected is better yet. Outraging, or at least amazing their parents is an important part of the act, and of course it is an act. Just as the thousands on spring break inundate the Fort Lauderdale, Florida waterfront, like a herd of white-faced Herefords, virtually indistinguishable from one another, they're expressing their break with the polite routine of the family in their younger days. They're expressing their freedom from the family and with all other rules of human conduct by joining another group. They're still as individually faceless as they were before, perhaps more so. But this passage rite is important to them. Fine. But then it's time for each of them to find his and her own pathway in the world, and it's my observation that very few of them do. They've simply left one group and joined another, and while they will soon put aside such childish and primitive activity, chances are they'll still represent a group and act in most ways in unison. They will tend to live in tract homes or condominium apartments with all the charm and creative touches of army barracks, and spend their entire lives taking their cues from those in their peer group. A good rule to follow is, whatever the majority of people are doing, under any given circumstance, if you will do the exact opposite, you will probably never make another mistake as long as you live. We need to calm down, relax more, smile more. Pick that spot on the fairway or on the green where you want that lovely little ball to land, and then, when you're ready, hit the ball. River person or goal person, and sometimes a combination of both, is the way to go. Using our intuition along with our intelligence as a guide can be the best way to produce really super ideas. Make it a habit to carry a folded sheet of paper along with a writing instrument at all times during the day. Ideas have a habit of making their appearance at unexpected times, in the shower, while driving the car, while having a meal. Watch for them at breakfast and lunchtime particularly, while taking a walk. Whenever the mind is in neutral, as I call it, ideas have an opportunity to bubble up to the surface and show themselves off. We won't always get our best ideas during think time, but by planting the problem we're working on deep in our minds, it seems that the great subterranean part of our mind works on the idea when we're doing other things. When it hits on a possible answer, it waits for a quiet time to slip it to the top for evaluation. Those ideas should be immediately written down for serious consideration. I believe that our intuition has a way of plumbing our racial memory, or searching what Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere, an invisible layer of human intelligence that forms a mantle around the earth. How it works is a mystery. That it does work, we've all demonstrated at times during our lives. planting a problem or question deep in the subconscious by first turning it every which way during an in-depth conscious attempt to solve it, usually results in the answer eventually appearing completely unbidden in our consciousness. Of course, we often say, it's so obvious. But it was not obvious when we rotated it on the rotisserie of our consciousness. It seems to happen with more frequency for those who count on its happening, who expect it and watch for it, as a ship's lookout watches for a light in the darkness. Women tend to be better at this than men. They seem to live closer to their intuition. Perhaps it's because they've historically had to, since they lack the physical strength to challenge men on a more basic level. I took my grandson to lunch recently. He's 10 years old. As we walked to the car afterward, there were some young men working with picks and shovels and jackhammers in what appeared to be the demolition of a service station. They were surrounded by dense clouds of cement dust as, stripped to the waist, they wielded their jackhammer, heavy picks, and shoveled the broken concrete. I stopped, and pointing to the young workman, asked Danny if that's the kind of work he wanted to do when he grew up. He watched them quietly for a moment and then shook his head. In the car, I explained to Danny that when men and women perform purely physical work, they're not utilizing their greatest resource. Thinking men and women are using their resources in the proper order. We can think better, more profitably, and serve more people through ideas than we can ever do physically. And it's better for our health, too. Then we have the joy of using our physical bodies for more agreeable pursuits: tennis, golf, sailing, fishing, swimming, camping, hiking, mountain climbing, running, exercising. Ideas, the great ideas that move us to be better and greater than we now are the deeply embedded anchors that will hold us in place steadfastly when the great storms of life crash about us. They're the anchors that prevent our being intimidated or diverted from our path by expediency, fad, or demagoguery. Great ideas provide us with a set of sensors that can pick up the dishonest and the phony, revealing the cheap and shoddy and the so-called quick buck. Great ideas provide a lifelong security system for us without disturbing our sense of humor. In fact, our sense of humor is greatly enriched by such ideas, and smiling and laughter become important parts of our days. We're by no means immune to mistakes, but we understand that they're a natural part of growth and reaching into the unknown. The ideas we hold should be in concert with our goals if our goals are to be successfully achieved. We say, I have an idea. What is that? It's surely more than a neurochemical electrical response, although it's that too. An idea is the bringing together of known increments to provide a new result. Let's go to the beach, someone says. Without a moment's hesitation, we take the known beach factor, add it to existing transportation facilities, the proper clothing, possibly a picnic lunch, and suggest the resulting idea to those we're with at the time. It all happens instantaneously, although all sorts of interconnections are going on in our brains. The greater our general information, the more combinations we can put together, and the greater the reach of our possibility thinking, as Dr. Robert Schuller calls it. That's why young people should think twice before complaining about school courses they'll never use as adults. All information of a positive kind has value when we're formulating ideas. When we set an important goal for ourselves, we present to our mind a problem to be solved, a challenge to be successfully fulfilled. Instantly, far down in the labyrinthine interstices of its vast potential, the mind goes to work to find the information we need to turn that idea into reality. We commonly use this astonishing ability for ordinary things. For example, the idea of obtaining a particular automobile soon becomes a true automobile we can drive and wash on warm Sunday afternoons. Perhaps our path from inception of the idea to the time we get into the automobile, turn on the key, and drive away is rather tortuous, even circular, leading first here and then there. More often than not, we get in our own way by doubting the suggestions that filter into our consciousness, only to discover later that they would have been marvelous shortcuts and simplifications of the process if we'd only heeded them. But eventually, the idea, the invisible idea, becomes sheet steel and glass and upholstery and rubber, and from time to time a pain in the neck as well. The idea has become real in our lives, even if it takes 3 years to pay for it. We become what we think about. But the thinking is up to us, and the degree to which people regularly underestimate their capacity for accomplishment is immeasurable. Curiously, we think nothing of the accomplishments of others. That is, what others do we tend to take in stride. But when it comes to setting goals for ourselves, we tend to play things outrageously safe, and thus remain within limits embarrassingly small. Especially if there's some sort of maintenance program in effect. That is, if we have a job, though its real demands upon us are minimal, we will usually shut down any other efforts to prepare ourselves for 1, a much better, more interesting kind of work, or 2, any sudden emergency that might develop. I remember watching a television news program in which laid-off workers of a closed Navy yard were being interviewed. The announcer asked, "Well, what are you men going to do now that the Navy yard is closed down?" The man nearest to him said, "Well, I guess we'll just have to wait for it to reopen again." Another man said, "Oh, I've worked in this Navy yard for 25 years. I don't know anything else." Here were human cattle that could graze in only one pasture, if we're to believe them, and now that the pasture was no longer there, they'd simply sit down and waste away. In 25 years, in his spare time, a person could learn to do heart transplants. What were all these people doing with the 16 hours a day they were not working? What about weekends and vacations? Take a pen and paper and work out the number of hours the average working person is actually on the job during a typical year. Then subtract it from the rest of his or her waking time. If an hour a day were devoted to learning, to doing anything of a valuable nature, the ending of a job would be an incidental thing, perhaps an actual benefit. And how about think time? Any man who is responsible for providing for his family should have emergency plans A, B, and C, at least A. Just as a platoon leader in combat must ask himself, what if the enemy attacks at night? From the rear, on Sunday morning during breakfast. The family provider should ask and work out on that legal pad what to do if the company I work for goes out of business, or lets me go for any reason, or moves to Europe. It's the kind of thinking that a man and his wife can do together as well as separately, and as a result have several possible courses of action. And in the meantime, how about that educational program in my main field of interest? I certainly don't want to be as dumb 5 years from now as I am today. But the Navy Yard workers that were interviewed on that television program were just as dumb as they had been 20 years before. The adults I questioned as a boy of 12 were not one iota smarter than they had been as 15-year-olds. They had shut down their thinking and learning apparatus. They were living creatures that responded to stimuli of the most basic kind, and that was about all. When they were hungry, they looked about for something to eat. Sleep, food, sex. The rest of the time, they absorbed whatever their world happened to present to them. They laughed at the Jack Benny and Fibber McGee and Molly radio programs. They slapped their knees and shook their heads and laughed, and then lapsed back into the partial coma that represented their usual waking state. During the industrial shakeout of the early 80s, we heard this comment again and again. I worked for that company for 30 years, and now I'm out, just like that. To hear them talking, one might think they'd made personal sacrifices for the welfare of the company they'd worked for. They say nothing about the fact that the company paid them for their time on the job and gave them the wherewithal to become anything they might have set their hearts on becoming. It was a fair arrangement. They were not kidnapped and pressed into servitude. They applied for their jobs and were accepted and were paid for the level of work they performed. There was no agreement to provide them with work until they were too old and infirm to continue. Why didn't they take the possibility of a layoff into consideration and prepare for such an emergency? My good friends John and Elsie did. When John was laid off from the steel company, he and Elsie sold their home in Ohio and moved to Florida, where they retired in the sunshine. If he'd been laid off years sooner, they had their little real estate business, buying, refurbishing, and selling on the side, which they could have turned to full-time. If they had, they would have become rich. The trouble with John and Elsie was that they, like so many of us, underestimated what they could do working for themselves with the time he was devoting to his job at the steel mill. The job and the regular weekly paycheck was something such people just don't voluntarily give up very often. But for most, The job and the union become father and mother figures on whom they depend for safety as well as survival. The company is so big, with such big smokestacks, and employs so many people and makes so much steel or whatever, well, it seems as though it'll be there forever. And all they need to do is show up, do whatever's necessary to keep the job, and then go home again. All the rest of the time, all those zillions of hours, year after year, decade after decade, they can just allow to pass with as little boredom as possible. Why did no one talk to these people about change? How do such people remain isolated from important information? They are apparently hermetically sealed in ignorance, wrapped and tied in myths and shibboleths. I know. I lived among them. Keep reading like that and you'll ruin your eyes, my father used to say. Reading doesn't hurt the eyes, it's good for them, and especially good for the gray matter just behind them. But all that is gradually changing. Each year more people are moving into the group that thinks. Ideas are the most important things on earth, and each of us has his own or her own idea factory. It comes as standard equipment at birth, the big brain of the Homo sapiens, the single surviving member of the genus Homo. The baby is born, and we hold in our hands a miraculous living creature whose potential is unknown. What will enter that astonishing brain? And from those ingredients, what kind of life will this child fashion? Peter Drucker has characterized public education as an institution designed for the perpetuation of adolescence. In talking with high school girls one morning at breakfast, it was immediately clear that Drucker knew what he was talking about. Of course, chatting with three 17-year-old girls for 30 minutes does not constitute much of an in-depth study, but those with whom I come in contact as clerks in the stores and on the telephone seem to offer little in the way of encouragement. The average man who likes to fish is not a particularly good fisherman. It's believed that 10% of the fishermen catch 80% of the fish caught. The average bowler is not a very good bowler. The average golfer is not a very good golfer, and the list goes on and on. As someone once wrote, most of us do only as much as we must do in order to get by without too much discredit. That's good enough is a commonly heard remark, and it usually means it's really not very good at all. And it might pass for the life story of all too many people in the most prosperous nation with the most yawning opportunities the world has ever known in the history of human civilization. It's too bad that thinking is not a required course in the public schools. Not remembering, which is what most schoolwork is about, but thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, right into the higher realms of university education. It's the highest function of which the human being is capable, and it's not taught in our nation's schools. Thinking is taken for granted. What every working person should receive upon finishing the training program offered by his employer, if there is such a program, is a tape cassette program and printed material entitled Your Life and Your Work. In it would be found much of the material we're dealing with here, plus such things as recommended savings plans, emergency planning, and simple aptitude tests designed to help the person find the main area of his inherent competence. All this should be fascinating to the person. It opens up all kinds of interesting windows of opportunity. Options, options, options. The very things we need if we're to make the kinds of plans that will maximize, at least to some degree, what we are and what we can do. The program would have a section headed, You Have Lost Your Job, and the section would deal with that subject. What can you do that the community wants or needs? The community being the community or the entire United States or the free world. A good friend of mine, Derm Barrett of Ontario, Canada, a business consultant, devoted 800 hours to learning Spanish so thoroughly that he now holds business seminars in numerous Latin American countries. It opened up a whole new world of interest and opportunity for him. 800 hours, about the same time most working people devote to their jobs in just 20 weeks. Learning the Spanish language means learning or beginning to learn about an infinitely rich and fascinating culture. And if anyone needs modern business know-how, it's Latin America. When Derm Barrett explained over the telephone how he had taken on the job of learning Spanish using his own principles of time management and goal setting, and how rewarding the resulting experiences were and are, I could feel his excitement and enthusiasm. His options had doubled. and how foreigners love us when we speak to them in their native tongue. Good ideas are wondrous, delightful, magical things. They explain why people sometimes earn vastly greater incomes after retirement than they ever did on the job to which they so assiduously clung for 35 or 40 years. With a pension providing a safe base below which they know their income cannot fall, they find they have the confidence to pursue those ends and ideas they lacked the courage to pursue when they were working. That's fine. There's nothing carved in marble about when we should do what we ought to do. Any time will do. But we hear such people say, "I should have done this 30 years ago. My God, think where I would have been today, and think of the fun we would have had." The fact is, there's no such thing as security as long as we're alive. Security may only be found at both ends of life, before and after, not during. If we're looking for security during our lifetimes, we're looking for something that simply cannot be guaranteed. Insecurity is our natural state. It's not the chimera, the fire-breathing, multi-legged and clawed monstrosity we think it is. Insecurity can mean autonomy and gives us the options we need for interest and challenge in our lives. Insecurity brings out the best in us. It makes us press upon ourselves. It doesn't hurt to have 6 months or a year's income tucked away someplace. That also gives us freedom and autonomy. It gives us time to make a change. A good idea is an idea that results in a change that is beneficial, and good ideas come in all shapes and sizes. A good idea means change, and a great money-making good idea needn't come up with anything radically new. There's a larger success lurking in everything that is successful already through good ideas. If there's a modest business in town that's earning a profit for its owner, it can be improved to the point of earning a much larger profit. Don't ever say, "I'd like to get to the point where I can start taking things easy." Certainly you can arrange for the hard work to be done by others, but you want to keep thinking and planning for the future. If you don't, you'll die. Once a person runs out of anything interesting to do, he starts the long downward slide. He begins to fall apart. Things start going wrong. After you die, you can take it easy. The people who live longest are those people who never run out of something to do. They're farmers who have new crops to plant and harvest, fresh cows to milk, and 100 other chores that demand attention. And they're teachers who have a new class every year, or writers who get through writing on one subject and are soon off on another. And they're people who never run out of ideas. When they finally do come to the end of their lives, they vanish like the image from a suddenly broken motion picture film. We learn in reading Ortega that we are the only creatures on the planet who are born into a natural state of disorientation with our world. All other creatures are at home in their world, controlled entirely by instinct and reacting automatically to whatever stimuli affects them. They never have to ask, "What will I do?" Why was this pre-planned state denied us? Because we're the only creatures with the power to create our own worlds within the world in which we find ourselves. An awesome power indeed. That's why ideas are the greatest things on earth, for it's ideas that shape our lives. Unfortunately, with all too many of us, it's the lack of great ideas that shape our lives by their absence. A poet once wrote, "Blessed is the man who has found his work." A great idea indeed. For the man or woman who has found an unending vein of interest to explore, the future represents a happy prospect. And let me repeat another great idea. The right work exists for each of us. If we have not yet found it, we can do no better than to continue our explorations until we do find it. Another great idea. Our rewards all the years of our lives will be in direct proportion to our service. We live in order to serve one another. Human beings have wants and needs. It's by meeting one or more of the wants or needs of others that we serve them. And our rewards, all the years of our lives, will be in relative proportion to our service. Because of that great idea, articulated by Einstein, we can get rid of the what's-in-it-for-me approach. That's the hallmark of the immature, the typical small-time operator. There's a restaurant operated by a family in a lovely coastal town in California. Month after month, year after year, it hangs on by its fingernails. Now this despite the fact that the food is quite good and the bakery products excellent. The owners have the idea firmly fixed in their combined mentality that the way to produce the largest profit is to give the least for the best possible price. The idea makes sense on paper. The less one pays for the product one serves, and the greater the price charged, the larger will be the profit spread. But this figuring is without the consent of the customer. The customer has an entirely different idea. The customer wants the most for the least amount of money, and the customer makes the decision as to where he or she will spend his or her money. People vote with their money. They will vote for one place rather than another because they believe they receive a better value. And at the restaurant under discussion, the customer quickly sees that he or she is being charged a maximum price for the least possible product. For example, while almost all restaurants serve butter on the table, this place butters the bread in the kitchen, but does so sparingly that it's immediately apparent, and it may not be butter at all. It's the same with the other dishes served. The least possible service for the largest possible price. That is, the largest price most customers will pay without argument and only a certain amount of grumbling. So people don't go back to this restaurant a second time. The most profitable customers for any business are those who come back again and again and bring their friends. This place misses that richest vein of trade because of its ridiculous penny pinching. Month after month, the owners fail to see the cause of their failure. Another place opened up not long ago in the same general neighborhood. It's crowded every day. It has a marvelously diversified menu and serves large, delicious servings for the prices charged. The customers at this new place feel they're being well served for the money they're spending. My wife and I were having lunch there one day when we noticed a man in street clothes cleaning the table next to ours. We had noticed how busy he was, jumping in wherever he was needed to give the busy waitresses a hand. We introduced ourselves. He was the owner. It was his 9th restaurant in an escalating plan, and he was delighted with it, as we were. It was the culmination of several years of working and planning, and it's a place to be proud of, a real winner. We told him we liked the place, had thoroughly enjoyed our luncheon, and would be back regularly, as would, I'm sure, the other local people who filled the place. Kill him with service. I forget who said that, but it's the magic key to success in business. Give your very best and work at making it better, and give them more than they expect for what they're paying. Do what you do so well that you'll guarantee always getting a disproportionate share of the available business. Service. We're here to serve each other. And every one of us does who receives anything back in the way of return. Those who do not serve do not receive anything. The greatest thing in the world is the opportunity to be of service to others. That's why those of us who live in the more enlightened democracies are so fortunate. There's a whole world out there crying for help, for ideas, for endless products and services. The third world, yes, of course, but the first and second worlds as well. Your neighborhood. The extent of your opportunity to be of service can be said to be the extent of your imagination coupled with your education. And the best place to begin is where you are. You may already be wonderfully successful in providing a useful service that makes demands upon your brains and ability, but of one fact we can be certain: it can be improved. Another is that there are always ways to expand your service to others that you haven't thought of. Perhaps yours is work so highly personalized that it cannot be increased. That might be true of your successful surgeon, sculptor, or painter. Within the ranks of every profession, there can be found a sprinkling of great ones whose expertise and service is of a quality and range that they do extremely well with the clientele they develop over a period of time. Then there are the very good, the average, and the below average. But it still works out that our rewards, in whatever form we may realize them, will be in relation to our service. Everyone who needs to earn a living should ask himself or herself, how can I best serve other people? That is, if we don't already know, deep down in the very fibers of our being, what we're supposed to do. We need to take Socrates' advice and begin an in-depth examination of ourselves. We might begin by thinking about our childhood. What were we attracted to? When we played with other children, did we want to be captain all the time, or king of the mountain? Or were we delighted to be one of the crew? In our daydreams, what recurring fantasy appeared? What were we especially good at in school? Which class did we most enjoy? Another excellent research source is the autograph book we passed around the class at graduations from elementary and junior high school, and high school. Our friends and classmates often saw our strong point, even if we took it for granted or weren't aware of it. I was astonished many years ago to uncover my old autograph book and found nearly every entry saying something like, "Good luck, Earl Nightingale, the storyteller." I was astonished because I had no recollection whatever of having told stories to the other kids. But after thinking about it, I realized that being something of an omnivorous reader, I must have shared some of the stories I read with my classmates. But to this day, I have no recollection of doing anything of the kind. Yet there they all are, all those entries saying, "Good luck, Earl Nightingale, the storyteller." There were my classmates in junior high school and high school actually writing down in my autograph book the career that I should follow. Perhaps they were good enough to do the same for you. To ask, what is the role of attitude in a person's success or failure, is much like asking, what is the role of granite in the Himalayas? Or what is the role of H2O in the Pacific Ocean? Attitude comes very close to being everything about success or failure. With a great attitude, a person can succeed, though he may start with very little else. Attitude makes the sale, or loses it. What is attitude? The dictionary describes it as a matter of bearing or mood, but it's much more than that. Attitude is what sets the stage for what we want or expect to happen. The person who goes through life, as millions do, saying, "With my luck, the whole thing will go down the toilet," goes down the toilet over and over and over and over again. His attitude sets the stage for failure. He or she expects failure. He or she thinks about failing, and he or she fails over and over and over and over again. A person can have a great education, but if he also has a poor attitude, he will almost certainly fail. The attitude that demands excellence always results in excellence. You and I can see to it that we maintain an attitude of great expectations. It's more fun and so much more interesting to adopt and keep such an attitude, and it always results in our reaching new levels of achievement. We're not born with a drive for excellence in our lives and work. Those are qualities that come from learning or experience or both. But we're born with exuberance and curiosity, and when these qualities are combined with great expectations, we can expect marvelous results. We try harder. We put more of ourselves into what we do when we have an attitude of great expectations. That's good enough won't do, not for a moment. An expectant attitude, an attitude that expects good things to happen, that expects success, seems to have an uncanny way of shaping future events and bringing together the most astonishing coincidences. The right people show up at the right time, and suddenly other people around us are infected by our ideas and spirit. Their morale goes up. They're as infected with the idea of excellence and success as we are. A great attitude is marvelously infectious. It can spread throughout an entire company or organization. If there are great attitudes at the top of an organization, there will be great attitudes throughout the organization. Everyone begins putting more of himself and herself into the effort. An American woman was once so impressed by the ragout at a fine restaurant in Paris, she asked the chef if he would give her the recipe. He was happy to comply, and he did so. A couple of years later, back in the same restaurant in Paris, the woman chided the chef about not giving her the complete recipe for the ragout. "It doesn't taste as good as yours," she told him. The chef went over the recipe again with her, and when she told him that she had followed it to the letter, He looked at her for a long moment, searchingly, and then said, "Madam, perhaps you left out the most important ingredient of all. Perhaps you forgot to throw yourself into the ragout." Our true attitude toward something has a palpable effect on those about us. It can even affect animals. A horse, for example, is affected by the attitude of its rider and will often react accordingly. It's as though we send out an aura of vibrations which are picked up by sensitive creatures about us. Women tend to be particularly susceptible to the auras or radiations of others. They feel good about a person, or they feel nervous and ill at ease, even suspicious. Most husbands have at one time or another experienced their wives saying to them after having met someone, "I don't trust that person, there's something fishy about him," and their appraisal is often later confirmed. Many times over the years I've found myself over-tipping the waiter or waitress who has a good attitude about doing his or her job. A friendly, happy, positive attitude often makes up for so-so food or other mistakes that might, had the attitude been average or poor, ruin a dinner. People who serve the public and depend upon tips for a part of their income can often double their tip income by simply improving their attitudes. They'll also cut down on the number of complaints. It's a fact of life that the great majority of people begin their days in a kind of neutral as far as attitude is concerned, and depend upon whatever stimuli they encounter to set the attitude tone for them. If things go well, and it's a beautiful day, their attitude may be fine. If things go wrong, or it's cold and raining, their attitude will reflect that also. Not understanding the importance of a great attitude and what it can mean to us, they put their attitudes in the hands of others or the elements and live accordingly. It's a reactive kind of life, not a very satisfactory sort of existence. I recall the day that the American hostages, held for so many months in Iran, were returned to the United States. The looks on their faces, the way many of them kissed the tarmac upon disembarking from the plane. Blessed freedom, just to be home again. As Mr. Levin, the correspondent who escaped after 11 months of captivity, shouted upon his return, "I'm a born-again American." How sweet it is after it's been taken away for a time, and yet how many millions of us take our days for granted and go about them grudgingly, defensively, with the attitude that says, "Do unto others before they can do unto you." Thousands of people, upon discovering what a change in attitude can mean for them, actually do become born-again Americans or born-again Canadians or born-again whatever nationality they happen to be, because there's no fragment of this freedom of ours that cannot be turned into the success we seek. There are no jobs so humble that they do not have hidden within them the opportunity for greatness and all the success we could possibly want. But it takes an expectant attitude to see it. That kind of attitude draws back the curtains of ordinariness that tend to cloak the work of the majority in common, everyday raiment, and exposes the possibilities within. You know, you and I are on a kind of holiday on Earth. Out of the mystery we appear to share our lives with the other living things on this small, blue, blessed planet. We spend a time here before merging back into the mystery once again. During this time, let us enjoy ourselves to the fullest. To do that, we need to, as wise old Socrates admonished us, examine ourselves and discover what we're best equipped to give for the journey's fare. There's really no good excuse for not doing that which we most want to do, nor for not enjoying to the fullest those experiences we find to our liking. They make the holiday all the more interesting and rewarding. Being on this holiday, there are few times that warrant genuine sadness, unless we take upon our shoulders the problems and miseries of the entire world, and that's futile. We need only brighten the corner where we are to the very best of our abilities. That's our part of the bargain. To give it our best during the time we dedicate to service, and the rest we can enjoy with those we love and with whom we share our lives. To ask, what is the role of attitude in a person's success or failure, is much like asking, what is the role of granite in the Rocky Mountains, or the role of H2O in the Pacific Ocean? It's almost everything. You're the rest. always felt I was pretty good in the perseverance department. After all, writing a radio program every day for 26 years, that's about 9,000 radio programs to be researched or thought of and written one word at a time on the typewriter before being recorded for broadcast. 6,300,000 words, one word at a time, doesn't exactly label one a fly-by-night kind of person. But next to Diana, when it comes to perseverance, I'm still in kindergarten. She is simply implacable. So between us, setting and reaching goals, no matter what their degree of difficulty, is not a matter for questioning. We do it. We've all seen the motion pictures in which the hero, mustering that last cubic centimeter of strength, crawls over the final sand dune to see, to his delighted astonishment, a shady oasis with abundant fresh water and the cheerful leader of a camel train who volunteers to give him a free ride back to civilization and ultimate victory. It was mustering that last bit of energy for just one more try, and then after that, just one more, that so often leads, in real life, to victory. Nothing takes the place of persistence. Do you remember that little essay so popular 30 or 40 years ago? It's true. Nothing takes the place of persistence once you know that what you're seeking is right for you. When I resigned my cushy job at CBS in Chicago in 1950 and started my own program on WGN, I also agreed to help sell time on my show by calling on advertising agencies. So I'd write my next day's program at night at home, then first thing the next morning I'd start hitting the advertising agencies to tell them why their clients should be advertising on my daily radio program. I was completely unknown in the Chicago market or anywhere else for that matter. My time on the air amounted to just 15 minutes each afternoon. My prospects would say, "No, sorry, your program is not in drive time." That was a ridiculous cliché, since at any time in Chicago there were a zillion cars on the roads and highways, to say nothing of the 10 zillion people listening to their radios at home in about a 6-state area. But that's the kind of answer I got, and so I became acquainted with the word no. After making calls on numerous agencies and getting nothing but no's, I would then rush to my tiny office in the Tribune Tower, get my program ready for broadcasting, and when the little red light came on, I was to be cheerful. Month after month, I made the rounds, and as I did, my thoughts often drifted back to those untroubled days in the quiet, air-conditioned studios at CBS, when all that was expected of me was the occasional exercise of my larynx. Stay with it, I would tell myself. One time I surprised a gentleman standing next to me in the men's room of a Chicago high-rise by actually muttering it aloud. "What was that? Sorry, I didn't hear you very well." "Oh, nothing at all. Just talking to myself, I suppose." Embarrassing, yes, but no less important for that. Stay with it. I knew that if I could just stay with it long enough to earn the respect and notice of the Chicago advertising community, I could succeed at my project. Stay with it, I would say to myself on those cold, snowy mornings and hot, humid summer days. Stay with it, I would say to myself on those heartbreakingly beautiful mornings when all in the world I wanted to do was play hooky, play golf, or walk along the lakefront in the park. So I made my calls, and I broadcast my programs, and I heard otherwise intelligent agency people say to me, "Radio doesn't work for us." I would then say, "When you say radio doesn't work for us, it's the same as a commanding general saying tanks don't work for us or airstrikes don't work for us. The effective commander makes best use of all forces available to him, and so does the good advertising executive. What do you mean radio doesn't work for us? What radio? Which radio? Which program or personality? Surely some facet of an industry as broad, pervasive, and successful as American radio will work for you. In fact, my program will work for you in Chicago. I'll see to it that my program does a good job for you and returns sales at many times the volume of its small cost." So I'd win the argument and lose the sale. Once he'd made his statement, he had to stand behind it, or run the risk of being a reasonable, flexible, intelligent advertising executive, and that was indeed a great deal to expect. It was in Croc's old bookstore on Michigan Avenue that I found the copy of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, in which I'd found that 6-word secret to success I'd been searching for so many years. I took the book back into Kroc's bookstore and pigeonholed Adolph Kroc himself. "Buy time on my radio program, and I'll sell this book by the thousands of copies," I said. "We've tried radio. It doesn't work for us," he replied. "Don't confuse my radio program with the word radio. My program will work for you with this book and with other books in your store as well." He thought a moment, then he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 40 cents a copy for every copy of the book you sell." Well, I wasn't supposed to work on commission. I was supposed to bring in contracts, 13-week, 26-week, or 52-week contracts. "You've got a deal," I said. Not since the publication of Gone with the Wind had old man Kroc seen orders for a book come in the way they came in for the next few weeks. As he wrote me very sizable checks for the thousands of orders at 40 cents a copy, he wished he'd followed my advice and simply bought airtime on my program. It would have been infinitely cheaper. He promptly rectified the matter. I got him to write a letter telling what my program had accomplished for him, and from that time on, with the proof the followers of the world need before they'll make a move, my program began to attract sponsors. It grew from 15 minutes a day to a half hour, then to a full hour, then an hour in the afternoon and a half hour in the morning, then to additional half-hour daily television program, all happily sponsored. On the program, I talked about things I found to be interesting: books, philosophy, people, events. My only rule for subject matter was that it had to be interesting to me. If it was interesting to me, I felt it would be interesting to a large section of the radio audience, and I was right. I've long thought it shameful the way the broadcasting industry as a whole has underestimated the listener. I think the radio listener wants more than repeated news, weather, and music. Radio is certainly one of the greatest educational opportunities in the world, the only rule being, keep it interesting. My habit of muttering to myself, "Stay with it," had paid off, just as it always does. The world is full of those who tried to get out of the doldrums and, meeting with difficulty and repeated turn-downs, retreated back to the big crowd. What's really amazing are the number who've made a sortie into a business of their own and, failing, have fallen back never to try again. Why should succeeding at a business of one's own be easier than learning to ski or play the piano? We're likely to fail at first. It's part of the learning process, but it's no reason to give up. We learn something important from every failure. It's staying with it that separates the winners from the losers. And staying with it applies to so much that is good and healthful in life. Failures aren't the end of the world, far from it. If they were, no human being would ever learn to walk, or speak, or ride a bicycle, or obtain an education. We take early failures for granted in so many things. Yet when we attempt something as adults, something as difficult as going into business, we become so self-conscious, we become so concerned about what our friends and acquaintances might think. One time the late Dr. Maxwell Maltz, the plastic surgeon who achieved a great deal of fame through his book Psycho-Cybernetics, dropped by my office for a chat and lunch. We fell to talking about his favorite subject, namely how a person can come to grips with himself, develop a healthy self-image, and find freedom in his world. At that time, Dr. Maltz, whom we called Uncle Max, was 72 years old. He was as busy as he had ever been in his life, traveling from one end of the world to the other, making speeches, returning to his New York offices for surgery commitments, and starting all sorts of new projects along the way. He told me he had discovered 4 important steps a person can take on a regular basis to form new habits that can build a healthy new self-image. As he talked at lunch, I made notes. Here are his 4 points, in the order in which he gave them to me. Number 1, forgive others with no strings attached. You must clean the slate absolutely by forgiving every person against whom you might hold some kind of grudge. You do this for your own sake, your own peace of mind. We don't hurt others when we hold hatred toward them. We hurt ourselves. And we hurt ourselves seriously by allowing such thoughts to fester in our consciousness. So number 1, forgive others, all others. If you cannot take this first step, you can forget the rest. You haven't grown up yet. 2, forgive yourself. See yourself with kind eyes. Try to forget completely all the idiotic things you've done, the pain you've given to others, the embarrassments you've suffered, the mistakes you've made in the past. Again, wipe that slate clean and forgive yourself. Look in the mirror, he said, and forgive yourself. Practice this and you can actually pull it off. It's not easy to forgive ourselves. We're our own worst critics, and we can be much tougher on ourselves than we are on others. But the fact is, blame doesn't help. It's a destructive emotion. 3. See yourself at your best. As Dr. Maltz put it, we can start the day in frustration or confidence. Take your pick. The intelligent thing to do is to pick confidence, if it's at all possible. There are bad days, but it's better to begin the day in a confident mood than in a mood of frustration. 4. Keep up with yourself. Don't worry about what others are doing or what others have. Keep your pace. It's different from the pace of others. It's faster than some, slower than others. Forget the Joneses and don't feel guilty about moving ahead of some of your contemporaries. The person who deliberately holds himself down to a slower pace just to be one of the gang is a fool. Keep up with yourself. Live the life you want to live. Earn what you want to earn. Do what you want to do. Live your own life, and don't be too concerned about how others are living theirs. Max told me that day at lunch that he called them the 4 steps to a healthy self-image. 1. Forgive others. 2. Forgive yourself. 3. See yourself at your best. Choose confidence instead of frustration. And 4. Keep up with yourself only. March to your own drummer. Go at your own pace, and don't worry about what others are doing. Very good advice from a distinguished physician. Staying with our plans, despite repeated setbacks, tends to build inner character, just as it draws maturity on our faces. Then there's the story I came across about Sparky. School was all but impossible for Sparky. He failed every subject in the 8th grade. He flunked physics in high school. Receiving a flat 0 in the course, he distinguished himself as the worst physics student in the school's history. He also flunked Latin and algebra and English. He didn't do much better in sports, although he did manage to make the school golf team. And then he promptly lost the only important match of the year. There was a consolation match. He lost that, too. Throughout his youth, Sparky was awkward socially. He was not actually disliked by the other students. No one cared that much. He was astonished if a classmate ever said hello to him outside school hours. No way to tell how he might have done at dating in high school. Sparky never once asked a girl out. He was too afraid of being turned down. Sparky was a loser. He, his classmates, everyone knew it. So he rolled with it. Sparky made up his mind early in life that if things were meant to work out, they would. Otherwise, he'd content himself with what appeared to be his inevitable mediocrity. But there was one thing that was important to Sparky: drawing. He was proud of his own artwork. Of course, no one else appreciated it. In his senior year of high school, he submitted some cartoons to the editors of his class yearbook. They were turned down. Despite this particularly painful rejection, Sparky was so convinced of his ability, he decided to be a professional artist. Upon graduating from high school, he wrote a letter to Walt Disney Studios. He was told to send some samples of his artwork, and the subject matter for a cartoon was suggested. Sparky drew the proposed cartoon. He spent a great deal of time on it, and other drawings. Finally, the reply from Disney Studios came. He was rejected once again. Another loss for the loser. So Sparky wrote his own autobiography in cartoons. He described his childhood self, the little boy loser and chronic underachiever, in a cartoon character that would soon become famous all over the world. For Sparky, the boy who failed every subject in the 8th grade and whose work was rejected again and again, was Charles Monroe Schultz. He created the Peanuts comic strip, and the little cartoon boy whose kite would never fly, and who never succeeded in kicking the football, Charlie Brown. Perseverance. Nothing can take its place. There's a place for every person who will persevere. There is a large success lurking in everything we do. And it's not just our success we're talking about. Millions of people, large and very small, have been cheered and have seen themselves in Charlie Brown. There's a Lucy who will snatch that football away in every neighborhood. She's a good girl, really. She just loves to frustrate Charlie Brown. Charles Schulz succeeded beyond his most sanguine imagination and earned and deserved that success. Perhaps he failed at everything else he tried because his talent and humor were so complete, so wonderfully successful when he finally found what it was he was supposed to do. Entrepreneur. E-N-T-R-E-P-R-E-N-E-U-R. Noun. A person who organizes, operates, and assumes the risk for business ventures, especially an impresario. The word comes from Old French. See enterprise. American Heritage Dictionary. For entrepreneurs, America was and is truly a paradise. All business activity in the United States and its territories began as entrepreneurial adventure. Trace any corporation back to its beginnings, or the beginnings of its parent corporation, or the beginnings of its parent corporation, as is sometimes the case, and you'll find it began as an idea that would fill or help fill a need or desire on the part of human beings who would become customers. Only human beings can buy things, or order that they be bought, even if the things purchased are for the consumption of things not human, like chickens, hogs, or beef cattle. We look today at a complex multinational organization like IBM and forget that the company began in the mind of a single human being. Anyone who starts or causes to be started a business venture is an entrepreneur. An impresario is one who does in the world of entertainment what the entrepreneur does in the world of business. Quite often the two are combined, for certain businesses are endlessly entertaining for those deeply connected with them, as well as for their customers. Both need customers. Without them, they'll close, their investment down the drain. The entrepreneurial adventure is endlessly attractive to those endowed with entrepreneurial spirits, adventurers, in varying degrees, whose visions of the future tend to be sanguine rather than sanguinary. That is to say, hopeful and enthusiastic rather than defeatist. The entrepreneur is the person who says, I think it'll be a big success. The non-entrepreneur says, you're going to lose your shirt. A survey taken many years ago of the most successful people in a large American city turned up the fact that most of their ultimate success depended in large measure on the jobs they had lost. Whether they had resigned or been fired wasn't all that important. And under questioning, those very successful people thought about that interesting fact for perhaps the first time and shuddered to think of what their present lives might have been like had they clung to one of those early jobs which at the time seemed so important to them and their families. They were not all entrepreneurs, of course, but they were people with faith in themselves and their ideas, which is the mark of success wherever it's found. During those important steps in their careers, they were no doubt warned by well-meaning relatives and friends to hang on to the jobs they had held and lectured on the dark and dismal pitfalls of adventuring off on something as ephemeral and evanescent as an idea. But of course good ideas are not ephemeral or evanescent as their state as a thought might indicate to the more fearful. They are the most important things in our biosphere, and it's producing ideas that raises the human being to his or her highest levels of achievement. Ideas solve problems, make our lives infinitely more interesting and rewarding, less dangerous, better fed, better employed, richer in countless ways, and wonderfully more comfortable. Without ideas, we would still be sitting in the trees grooming one another. All the creatures on the planet have life-saving techniques. Some are fleet of foot, others sharp of claw and fang. There are fish in the deep, dark trenches of the oceans that dangle tiny lanterns above their waiting jaws. But for the human being, there is the brain, the idea producer, to save his or her skin in myriad ways. The idea that results in a person running the risks of starting his or her own business depends strictly upon the person's background, education, previous levels of accomplishment, and aspirations. When I resigned from CBS, my friends told me repeatedly what an idiot I was. They reminded me that there were 10,000 guys in the U.S. who would part with anything for my contract with CBS. I'd reached the top. I went to work in the beautifully paneled, brass-trimmed elevators of the world-famous Wrigley Building in Chicago every day. I rubbed shoulders with the rich and famous, and I earned top dollar in my profession. Thousands, no millions, listened when I read the news or read the latest Jell-O commercial. Man, I was on top of the heap. I had it made, and I was only 28 years old. It does little good to remonstrate with an entrepreneur. Christopher Columbus, brilliant navigator that he was, could have spent his life in peace, navigating up and down the coastal waters of Europe and remaining within the known boundaries of the period's world maps. But at the edges of the known waters there appeared the terrifying legend, "Here there be dragons," and it was there that Columbus desired to sail, and it's there that every entrepreneur desires to sail. It's interesting to note that on the old maps, beyond the known world, there was never a legend reading, "Here there be unlimited opportunity for exploration. No doubt much gold and silver and precious gems. Strange human creatures live beyond these boundaries, waiting for discovery and development for the daring and intrepid sailor." Even though it had always been that way in the known world, no one ever suggested that it might still be that way in remaining undiscovered areas. It was the natural proclivity of cartographers, and is still the tendency of advice-givers, to look upon the unknown as bad. For they, like children going into a darkened basement, feel that the dark and the unknown must hold strange and fearful creatures unimaginable in the known and lighted world. They cannot think otherwise. It's their nature, as it's the nature of bankers, CPAs, many wives, and all brothers-in-law. What a dumb idea, they say. At the time of Columbus, not a single live dragon had ever been seen upon the planet Earth by anyone. Dragons were, in fact, fairy-tale creatures. Yet they always inhabited the uncharted regions of the world. It said so right on the maps. So when you get an idea that you think will result in an excellent business of your own, and it needn't be a new idea by any means, keep it to yourself and your secret notepad for a period of time while you simmer it on the rotisserie of your minds, consciousness and unconscious. Let it turn while you view it from every angle. Look at it from the standpoint of the worst possible scenario. If it's a good, sound idea, it should survive even the worst times, as good businesses do. Incidentally, there are recession-free businesses, and many businesses that do as well or better in recessions than in good times. It was during the very worst years of the Great Depression of the 30s that the American film industry really got it together. There were delightful taffy merchants in uniform and wearing white cotton gloves in front of the better Los Angeles theaters. What wonderful hard taffy that was, and what opulent, magnificent palaces were the motion picture theaters of that time. For the American poor, they took the place of the great Gothic cathedrals of the Middle Ages. All of that, and free dishes to boot. And the Saturday morning matinees, what cliffhangers. Remember Harold Lloyd on the face of that great clock? All for a dime, although older folks had to pay 15 cents. And there was Wrigley's chewing gum, which got its start as a premium in boxes of soap. And miniature golf, and Monopoly, the hamburger stand, and radio. What a time for the entrepreneur. And it was the very time, despite the worst doldrums the nation had ever experienced from a fiscal standpoint, that saw the beginnings of thousands of companies that are today among the giants of the world. So what's your bag? So you have to ask yourself, or at least it's a good idea to ask yourself, what do I want to do with my time, however short or long it may be? Do I want to see the world and live in a penthouse apartment overlooking the sea and drive fine European cars and command a 50-foot flybridge sport fisherman with twin diesels throbbing below my feet? Or do I want to make a difference with what I believe to be a very good idea or talent that I've worked very hard to hone to marketability? If the money comes, great. I can spend it as well as the next guy. But I'm happiest doing my thing, and I don't want a boss telling me what to do for the rest of my working life. I want to be independent as much as that's possible, considering I can only succeed to the extent that I serve others. My public, whatever that amounts to, is my boss. I must please those people or they won't give me the money to buy things I need and want. There seems to be an ancient predisposition in the human race to say no. It is, of course, a conservative response, a status quo protector, a reactionary response that says, I'm managing to cope with things as they are, don't rock the boat, don't introduce any new problems for me. Change of any kind always carries with it the possibility of change for the worse. We're reminded by Eric Hoffer in his book The True Believer that there is a conservatism of the very poor as rigid as that of the very rich. For the poor are managing survival. No matter how bleak their circumstances, they feel that any change may be for the worse. The very rich are quite content with things as they are, and they try very hard to keep them that way. But we all come from poor backgrounds, some of us more recently than others, and the ancient fear of making a decision that could result in disaster still haunts the corridors of our minds. However, successful people tend to say yes to life and its possibilities. They go out toward life in cheerful expectation of happy results. They enjoy the risks of considered opportunity and adventure. They've found that with their expectations, zeal, and commitment, they tend to win, and the occasional negative result is shrugged off as part of the game. We really don't have time to keep saying no if we expect to succeed. Survival should not be the only option for a human being. It's fine for horses and cows, and pigs and chickens seem to thrive on it, but simply surviving is stultifying and the beginning of the long slide toward oblivion for the man or woman. Human beings simply require more. It's important that we enjoy our time here and make some sort of contribution to the welfare of others. All but the bent and twisted psyches will go along with that. The lifetime takers are those who have failed to mature. Our joy comes from producing, giving, creating. Being happy seems to depend on the direction in which we're heading. Happiness depends at any given time upon our moving towards something we wish to bring about in our lives. We can feel it in the smallest things. For example, we're actually slightly happier when we're going out to dinner than we are on the trip home after dinner. We're happier Christmas morning than we are Christmas afternoon. We're happier when we're moving toward a goal than after we've achieved it. Remember the line, be choosy, therefore, what you set your heart upon, for if you want it strongly enough, you'll get it. Why should we not say yes to a life? Surely the most astonishing state in the vast universe. Life is natural on planet Earth, but we found it nowhere else. And being human puts each of us in charge of his or her destiny on this incredible planet, speeding through space on the great wheel of the Milky Way galaxy at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And as the great galaxy and the mystery of space turns on its invisible axis, we rotate around our life-giving sun, turning as we do on our own slightly wobbly axis with our captive moon. Think about it once in a while. We enjoy an occasional science fiction story or motion picture, but nothing can equal the reality of our existence. Here we dwell on this tiny grain of sand among billions of other grains and stars. Some of those stars are so large that if one were placed where our sun now resides, our planet would be almost in its exact center. And out of it all, we have this delightful blue planet, small but mostly agreeable, with its wonderful oceans and seas, its mountain ranges, its snow and glaciers and forbidding deserts and very dwellable places in between. It boggles my mind, and in the midst of it all, we're granted a holiday on Earth. How we tend to underestimate everything. How we look for a king to serve, before whom to fall on our knees in abject subjection. Tell us what to do, we shout. Show us the way. Lead us, we are sheep. Poor little lambs who've lost our way. Ba, ba, ba. We need only stand up and choose our first destination. We need to stop playing the fool. Aristotle said excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those qualities because we've acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an art, but a habit. We are what we repeatedly do, but what we do is a matter of choice. Excellence is a habit. So is ordinary, common ways of doing things. So is a poor, substandard way of doing things a habit. We form habits to match our outlook on life. Aristotle said, "We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but rather we have those because we've acted rightly. We are what we do and how we do what we do, but what we do and how we do what we do are matters of personal choice. We are the only creatures on the planet Earth with a choice as to what we do and how we do it. And saying yes can lead us to excellence. Yes, I will do that to the very best of my ability, and doing it well repeatedly will lead to the habit of excellence. Excellence is a wonderful way to say yes to life. Excellence invariably brings us joy." The distinguished philosopher George Santa Anna said, "There is no cure for birth and death save to enjoy the interval." Excellence helps us enjoy our days. The distinguished Jesuit paleontologist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, "It is our duty as men and women to proceed as though difficulties do not exist. We are collaborators in creation." Our own great Henry David Thoreau put it this way: "We have only to proceed confidently in the direction of our dreams and live the life we have imagined to meet with a success unexpected in common hours." Sometimes one wonders how many times we must be bludgeoned over the head with liberating truth before we can muster the confidence to stand up on our own hind legs and build great lives for ourselves. We must clean the slate of all of our pet myths. It takes money to make money. If that were true, we'd have a world of poor people. Rich people had to start somewhere. You have to know someone. You have to get the breaks. You have to be lucky. God, how we love to surround our inactivity with nonsense of that kind. Personally, I'd rather go along with the great ones. Don't talk. Listen. You can't learn anything when you're talking. Listen to that inner voice. I love the way James Allen put it in his classic little book, As a Man Thinketh. "Dream lofty dreams, and as you dream, so shall you become. Your vision is the promise of what you shall one day be. Your ideal is the prophecy of what you shall at last unveil." The greatest achievement was at first and for a time a dream. The oak sleeps in the acorn. The bird waits in the egg. And in the highest vision of the soul, a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of realities. You will realize the vision, not the idle wish, of your heart, be it base or beautiful, or a mixture of both, for you will always gravitate toward that which you secretly most love. Into your hands will be placed the exact results of your own thoughts. You will receive that which you earn, no more, no less. End of quote. Saying yes to the world means we have a nice balance and pretty good mental health. The Menninger Foundation recognizes some guidelines for good mental health, so check yourself against 5 points from those guidelines. 5 important attributes of mentally healthy people are, number 1, a wide variety of sources of gratification. This does not mean that they chase frenetically from one activity to another, but that they find pleasure in many different ways and for many things. If for any reason they lose some of their sources of gratification, they have others to turn to. For example, a person who loses a good friend through death may sorrow, but if he has other good friends, he draws psychological sustenance from them and recovers. But if a person loses his only good friend, he has little to fall back on and continues to grieve in his loneliness. A person has the same problem if his only interest is his job, or his immediate family, or a single hobby. 2. Flexibility under stress. A windstorm may blow over the great oak, while the grass and reeds about it are undamaged. They're flexible, the oak is not. Mentally healthy people learn to roll with the punches. When faced with problems, they can see alternative solutions. Flexibility under stress is closely related to having a wide variety of sources of gratification. With more supports to fall back on, a person is less threatened by situations that produce fear and anxiety. Number 3, recognition and acceptance of limitations and assets. Put another way, they have a reasonably accurate picture of themselves and they like what they see. This doesn't mean they're complacent about themselves, but that they know they cannot be anyone else, and that's all right with them. They build on their assets and don't knock their heads against the wall in areas in which they have little or no ability. 4, understanding the importance of treating people as individuals. Mentally healthy persons recognize others as distinct and different and original human beings and treat them as such. Make them feel important and esteemed. People who are preoccupied with themselves pay only superficial attention to others. They're so tied up in themselves that they cannot observe the subtleties in another person's feelings, nor can they really listen. Mentally healthy people care about what other people feel. 5, keeping active and productive. Mentally healthy people use their resources on their own behalf and on behalf of others. They do what they do because they like to do it and enjoy using their skills. They don't feel driven to produce to prove themselves. They're in charge of their activities. The activities are not in charge of them. When they're chosen for leadership of one sort or another, it's because they have the skills to lead in a given situation, not because they have to exercise power over others. Qualifying as a mentally healthy person isn't all that difficult, but it does include those 5 important criteria. Those who qualify are people who like to say yes to life, and do so whenever they feel they can. Do you have a wide variety of sources of gratification? Are you flexible under stress? Flexibility under stress was once nominated as the most important qualification of a great executive by the Harvard Business School. Do you recognize and accept your limitations as well as your assets? Do you treat others as individuals, each one separate and worth recognition as such? Are you active and productive? Are you in the driver's seat of your activities rather than in the back seat going along with someone else's direction? If you answered yes to all 5 of the criteria for good mental health, you're no doubt the person I'm talking about. Perhaps you're looking for a new aiming point, a new goal, a new interest in life. If you do not meet the 5 criteria, examine the 1 or more that you do not meet and resolve to qualify as soon as you can. And by all means, relax and open your doors and windows to the fresh breeze of life and its possibilities. Start saying yes. All my life, at just the right time and not a second sooner, I've been blessed with the greatest good fortune. I've had my share of setbacks, but with steadily recurring faith that the system I've outlined in this book really works, I've watched it confirm and reconfirm itself over and over again. Yes, we obtain what we make up our minds to obtain. We fulfill our expectations in each of the 3 vital areas of our lives. 1, our work. 2, our family. 3, our income. And not necessarily by any means in that order. I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was still a young boy. Broadcasting came along as a serendipitous spin-off, so my work has been satisfactorily progressing from the time I was mustered out of the Marine Corps following World War II. Since 1950, I've been writing and broadcasting my own radio programs, and for many years in Chicago, my own daily television programs. And since 1956, I've been writing and narrating recordings in an attempt to spread the word about achievement. One of the most difficult ideas for the human being to fully assimilate is that while we are social creatures, achievement is an individual and isolated affair. That is, while we're a part of a population of many millions and must find our being in successful relationships with such numbers, in fact our success depends upon it. In order to succeed in the steady pursuit and completion of our goals, we must think and act as distinct and separate, even different creatures. Just as a successful marriage, filled to overflowing with joy and genuine love for one another, depends upon two distinct individuals whose characteristics and experience perfectly meld them into an even better whole, our success as individuals operating in a highly populated environment must be an individual thing in each of the three categories: family, work, income. We need all three. And keep in mind that income comes in two distinct and important categories. It's the money we earn for the service we render, and equally important, it's the psychic income we receive for the service we render and for the full or nearly full utilization of ourselves in the process. This psychic income comes from both the family and the work and results in our self-esteem, the way we feel about and accept ourselves. We need all three, and we need the income in both categories. A man without the right woman in his life is a crippled, truncated, incomplete person. The same is true for the woman. Each of us is a half walking around looking for the other half. And when the two correct halves finally come together, all the lights go on and the music swells, and anything at all becomes quite possible. And it's the same with the idea of work, or profession, or career, or whatever you want to call it. Two halves coming together to make a whole. But just as the successful marriage is different from all other marriages, successful or not, a person and his or her work, when it's the correct work, are different from all others, even those in the same work. That's because no two people are alike, and each of them brings a slightly different chemistry and experience and genetic profile to whatever he or she does. Diana and I were both married to other people before we met and fell deeply in love. Neither of us could bring to the others exactly what we brought to our relationship, nor was it possible before for either of us to find the astonishing blend of characteristics that worked to our mutual benefit when we did find one another. It was as though a master craftsman had formed two oddly shaped and complex parts and tossed them at different times into the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles apart. In each was the required electronic homing device that would seek its perfect counterpart, but in the attempt might first form imperfect connections with others similarly involved. Finally, one morning in a completely strange setting, these two complicated parts would float into each other's range and begin a circling process to attempt once again to see if a perfect match-up were possible. And click, perhaps that's where the expression "we just clicked" comes from, the two suddenly find they fit. Not perfectly at first, but very well. And with the passing of each day after that, the fit gets better, tighter, until the seams are no longer visible. From that point on, they each exist as parts of a whole. They find their being together. The family is a success. The work should be a similar phenomenon, but with greater latitude. Mozart wrote great operas, but he also wrote delightful vaudeville sketches. As long as wonderfully original music was involved, Mozart was in his element. The architect can design a dwelling or a great auditorium or a church, or a child's treehouse or a prison. To find the right person, we must know that the person exists, and that soon or late we shall come in contact with that person. With such expectancy, we become a willing magnet, receptively set at the correct signal, a scanning radar, we might say, with the inchoate picture of the person we're looking for, a part of our mind and being. We then need to bide our time, and wait for the lights to go on and the music to play. Finding and living in the right work is in some ways quite similar, except it's a comfort we feel, a competence that we don't feel when doing other things. We can all do hundreds of things, just as we can meet hundreds of people of the opposite sex. But one of those things we can do with an uncommon ease and facility, the way Robinson Jeffers or Edgar Allan Poe could write poetry that can move us to tears. When that happens, the work is a tremendous success. And when that happens, it often follows that the income in both important categories, psychic and real, will take care of itself. But with these two great divisions of life now successfully accomplished, it's time for creative thinking. With this factor at work, the rest of one's life is assuredly endlessly interesting and endlessly successful. For with creative thinking, which includes the input of others who join your team, you're on a roll, as they say in Las Vegas, that needs to end only when you do, and it often happens that it need not end then but be carried on by others. with a happy home life and in the right work, whatever that happens to be, and it will always involve serving others because that's what we're here for. Adding the increment of creative thinking will give us an endless tessellation of new goals to reach. We have something interesting to do every day of our lives. And on the days when we have nothing at all to do, the idle Sunday or holiday that we devote to leisure, they have meaning also because we've earned the time off and feel good about it. Millions are now enjoying to the fullest their retirement years for the same reason. They've earned them, and each new day is an exercise in doing exactly what they want to do. As I was working on this chapter in Carmel, California, the Federal Express courier arrived. She's a delightful, attractive young woman of perhaps 26 or 7 with whom we've had a happy relationship for many months. I asked her if she enjoyed her work with Federal Express. "I love it," she said. I think we'd known that by the energetic and cheerful way she delivers and picks up letters and packages. I commented on the hundreds of young women and men who have found meaningful employment because Federal Express has come into being. Whereupon our young courier invited us to attend the Federal Express open house party on an upcoming Thursday evening in Watsonville, a town a few miles north of us. "We're hoping Fred Smith will come," she said. "Well, who's Fred Smith?" I asked. "Oh, he's the man who started Federal Express," she said, obviously surprised that I didn't know. "We've invited him. I hope he's not too busy." Fred Smith, I thought. What an ordinary name for a man who created a whole new world of mail and package delivery. What an astonishing and talented person he must be. I hope he's as successful in his family life as he is in his work. Think of the hundreds of thousands, the millions his fertile imagination has served. And to think we didn't even know we needed Federal Express until Fred Smith put his beautiful system to work for us. Now there are thousands of jobs where before there was only a vacuum. Jobs for pilots and ground personnel, millions of dollars in equipment, and all the cheerful, energetic pick-up and delivery people like the happy young woman who serves us. The prosperity radiating from such an enterprise is incalculable. I hope Fred Smith made it to the Watsonville opening, too. Federal Express is a good example of the positive effects a good idea put into action can bring about, and what a perfect example of creative thinking. Nothing about it contains a new idea except the system of collection and distribution at Memphis, Tennessee. Letter and package delivery is one of the world's oldest businesses, and airmail is as old as aviation. But door-to-door overnight mail from any 2 points in the country was a new idea whose time had definitely arrived. It was an idea the U.S. Postal Service should have thought of, but creative thinking and monopolies have never worked well together. They're incompatible and don't attract the same kind of people. How about you and what you do? How can creative thinking revolutionize your work? Work, income, psychic and financial, and family. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you score each category of your life? Work, income, family. Mine has 10s at every level, I'm happy to say, but of course I've been at it for some time. I love my work, my incomes are just what I want them to be, and my family life couldn't be better. I don't intend to stop here, but for the present I'm on schedule. The goals I've yet to achieve are in order and coming closer all the time. 10 years from now, I expect I'll look back upon this time much as I look at snapshots now that were taken 10 years ago. Fondly, perhaps, but with no desire to turn back the clock. It's getting better all the time. So let's add thinking as a fourth factor. Our list now reads work, income, psychic and financial, family, and thinking. I think I can hear someone saying, "I'm not much of a creative thinker." You don't have to be much of a creative thinker to come up with one idea. When someone succeeds, everybody benefits. The entire community and the nation benefit, and in time the whole world can benefit. Think of the countless things that did not exist in the past from which you benefit every day. Each of them was a good idea, and good ideas are free. Implementing them may cost a great deal of money, but it had to start with the idea, not the money. A good idea attracts money. The better the idea, the more money it attracts. Form the habit of using a legal pad and pen. Jot down your ideas, especially those that affect you emotionally, those ideas in which you want to personally become involved. Work, income, psychic and financial, family, and thinking. We need to devote appropriate time to each of those 4 categories. We don't have to say creative thinking. All thinking tends to be creative. The word creative seems to frighten a lot of people. It seems to take on the connotation of other creative endeavors such as music, painting, or poetry. Thinking is something we come abundantly equipped to do, and we can all do it to our own satisfaction and the satisfaction of who knows how many others, as it pertains to what we are uniquely equipped to do. But we are not trained to think. We have to practice it. If you're happy in your present work, by all means stay in it. You can find all the creative possibilities you need within it. If you're a homemaker, the possibilities are endless. If you want to find creative expression outside of your work in an avocation or hobby, fine. But utilize your strengths, and they begin with your mind. As Watson of IBM used to say, think. Look what it did for IBM. Who succeeds in America, and why? The person who succeeds in America is the person who sets his or her own wages, goals, and lifestyle. Successful people are those who discover that life is really quite ready and willing to meet their requirements. They set their incomes to meet their needs and wants through discovering within themselves a marketable factor and developing that factor to whatever degree necessary in order to derive the appropriate reward response. Unsuccessful people may be said to be those who make their lifestyles fit whatever wages they receive. They put themselves on the receiving end of things and have little to say about their own economic welfare. Successful people put themselves behind the wheel of their lives. The unsuccessful ride in the passenger seats. Almost everything has an economic base today. We're rewarded by the amount of money we receive for what we do. What we do in a free society and what we charge for what we do in a free society are largely matters of personal choice. If we find our best interests and opportunities for personal expression within the framework of a large corporation, we can so develop and apply ourselves as to reach whatever levels of accomplishment and reward we're willing to earn. It takes time to succeed, and it should. We need to earn our stripes through the daily passage of time and experience so that each successive step is accepted and applauded by those who've come to know us. Meaningful and richly rewarding journeys take time. They take preparation, careful planning, and as every seasoned traveler knows, they're subject to the vagaries of incident and the mistakes and inefficiencies of others along the way, and our own. But if the journey has its adventures and misadventures, it has a definite upward momentum, and there's no doubting its eventual destination. For that's the goal of the person in command. Each new upward step along the way prepares our resolute traveler for the next plateau, and if he or she does not lose the exciting vision of the goal to be reached, or meet with an untimely end, the silent tragedy of war and accident, the goal, with all the trimmings and more, will be his or hers. Remember Cervantes' words, "The journey is better than the inn." The journey is our life, our holiday on earth, our time here, as we successively set new goals or dive back into the great rivers of interest, or both. We receive what we fully expect to receive, and usually a good deal more. We become what we think about. We become successful to the extent of our true desires and determination, and we do so by building on our strong points, our fort. Incidentally, that's pronounced fort, never forte, as the uninformed would have us believe. Forte is an Italian musical term. What is your fort? You should know what it is by now. At what are you best? What gives you the deepest satisfaction? Whatever that is can be honed to marketable proportions in some way and applied in service to others to earn you the rewards you seek and should have and will have. And that's your part of the bargain. No one's supposed to do that for you or hold your hand or rush to your aid every time you slip or fall back a little. That's the earning part that falls on each of us. There's help enough on every side if we're wise enough and energetic enough to make use of it, skills to hone. And there are the numerous people who do come to our aid once we're on course. But such people need not be sought nor importuned. They come of their own natural need, like magic, at just the right time. Events begin to fall into our lives like missing pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. They're the mark of a person with the attitude that tells the world he or she knows where he or she is going and fully expects to get there. They approach their commitments with intentionality and delight, as my friend Dr. Charles Garfield puts it in his book and cassette program on peak performers. The distinguished Dr. Abraham Maslow, former president of the American Psychological Association, put it this way: if you deliberately plan to be less than you are capable of being, then I warn you that you will be unhappy for the rest of your life. You'll be evading your own capacities, your own possibilities. And let me add this. If you think you can succeed in a large way and play it safe at the same time, you're sadly mistaken. Success takes risk. It takes full commitment. You go out on the limb, so to speak, and take your chances alone. The warm, comfortable, huddling masses must be left behind, along with the old neighborhood and the small dreams. Risk and success are at opposite ends of the same balancing beam. You cannot have one without the corresponding weight of the other. Risks up the ante, raises the green fee, and limits the membership, but it makes playing more fun, and you seldom have to wait in line anymore. The late motion picture producer Mike Todd put it well. He said, "Being broke is a temporary situation. Being poor is a state of mind." Who has success in America, or Canada, Mexico, or Peru, or France, or West Germany, or Japan, or anywhere else? Those who have taken charge of their lives and are directing them to their own best use, whatever that is. Who does not have success? Those persons who have not taken charge of the direction of their lives, but have simply reacted to the environment in which they found themselves. They've simply become a part of it. Is success, as we've defined it here, worth the trouble, the effort, the commitment, the dedication, the perseverance? Yes. Yes, of course it's worth it. The time will pass anyway. Why not put it to constructive, productive use? Everyone benefits. Nobody loses. In every field of human endeavor, it's the successful men and women who make the important difference. They see growth and improvement as the natural order of things, and they can see themselves growing into new arenas of achievement and commensurate reward. "Only that day dawns to which we are awake," wrote Henry Thoreau. What a pity it is for a human being with a gift of consciousness to take life and all that's connected with life for granted, to live each day as his or her due, and quite likely find more to criticize than to be grateful for. Yet that's exactly how millions live out their lives. They often give the impression that they have a contract with forever, when it's really for only a handful of years. Why not give it all we have to give? Why not make a thorough exploration of ourselves, and by so doing find what it is we have to add to the quality somewhere, to make life better because we've made an appearance here, to serve in the way we think we can serve best. Besides, succeeding is so much fun, especially if it means moving several plateaus above the one on which you spent your youth. For one thing, it tells you you've done a better job of serving the community than your parents. That's progress. Perhaps your children will do a better job of it than you, and keep the ball rolling. And succeeding brings so much of the world within the realm of experience for you. You could actually fly on the Concorde and take a trip on the Orient Express, cruise along the coast of China if you like, or fly over the poles. Succeeding brings the world within range, including much greater success. So now, let's think in new directions. How about this idea? Fly to Cannes, France. After a few days on the Riviera, charter a yacht and spend the next couple of months exploring the coasts of Italy, Yugoslavia, and the Greek islands. After making arrangements to charter the boat again next year to continue your explorations, fly back home and devote 9 or 10 months to business. Then back to Europe and your leisurely explorations. Turkey, Israel, Egypt. After visiting Cairo for a while, how about sailing up the Nile? 2 or 3 months each summer exploring the perimeter of the Mediterranean would still leave 9 months or so each year for important work. That's a nice balance. Oh, on your leisurely explorations, whenever you find a spot you especially like, just stay there as long as you like. Spend the whole summer there if you like. No packing and unpacking, no fiddling with luggage and transfers. Just check in with customs at each new country. American dollars are welcome everywhere. And in your resting time spent on deck relaxing, you might want to get out the old yellow legal pad and make a few notes. Good ideas can be wooed anywhere. Just think, one idea that you might get early one morning while sailing in the Adriatic or the Aegean Sea could be worth millions when properly put to work back home. Pay for the whole summer many times over. Remember, it isn't the time you spend working that matters as much as the good ideas you come up with and then put into operation. Besides, with 9 months out of the year for productive effort, 3 months of leisure should produce dozens of excellent ideas. Ideas find leisure time the best soil in which to grow and show their bright, intriguing faces above ground. It could be said that taking 3 months off each year could be more productive than the traditional 3 weeks. More fun, too. If you need to go back for any reason for a few days or a week, there are always airports nearby. Let's say chartering the sailboat costs $2,000 a week, including crew and cook, and you charter for 12 weeks. That's about $25,000 plus extras for the summer, plus airfare. Not bad. A lot cheaper than buying the yacht and having to maintain it and insure it year-round. In fact, you could go on doing that for 10 years or so and still save tons of money over what it would cost to buy and maintain your own boat. Besides, if you can't come up with a $25,000 idea in 3 months of floating around the Mediterranean, you're not thinking at all. Just don't forget to pack that yellow legal pad and a few good ballpoint pens. You might look for a yacht named Eureka, surely somewhere in Greece. Well, we tend to perform well in the role in which we habitually see ourselves. Cruising around the Med could do wonders for our self-images. Who knows, we might find just the spot to build the loveliest little European-style American retirement village, with all European capital. Well, there's just no end to the good ideas that some leisurely world travel might engender. Wandering around small offbeat villages, who knows what we might see or pick up in the way of an unusual product that might go over big back in the States. I brought up the idea of cruising the coasts of the Mediterranean because I wanted to move your mind laterally, away from the ordinary. Genius has been defined as the ability to think in new directions. After all, wasn't that what typified all the great geniuses you can think of? The great artists, composers, writers, inventors, they were all inventors, all creators. They all thought in new directions. Life should be many things for all of us, but it should seldom, if ever, be boring. We don't have enough time to waste any of it in a state of boredom, or at least any more than we have to. It may be necessary for us to attend meetings, but hopefully they can be kept as short and as close to the actual agenda as good manners permit. Even meetings can be made more interesting with a bit of preparation and originality. Remember the comment, the American people can become anything they decide to become. The trouble is, they seldom make that decision. I woke up one morning about 15 minutes before the clock radio alarm was to sound off. A great experience to just lie back and luxuriate when there popped into my mind the thought that life is its own reward. It came to me that having life itself, life being such a miraculous achievement, is like winning the grand prize. What we do after that, what we do with our lives, is the frosting on the cake. We hear young people ask, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is service, and whatever we decide to do or be to provide that service. We can do whatever we want with it. That's the terrible, to me wonderful, freedom of the existentialists. Never before have I been as conscious of how stunning an achievement life itself is, in all its forms. Perhaps that was how the great Dr. Albert Schweitzer felt about life and why he was so reverent about it in all its multifarious forms. We're so lucky to actually experience life. To be given the opportunity to do something worthwhile for others is our way of earning our way here, just as they spend their days serving us in so many ways. It becomes important, then, for us to do our work as creatively, as excellently as we can. And to think of new and better ways to do those things it has been given us to do so that we can maximize our input during the time we spend working. I remember reading something about what an ongoing education will do for us, that it teaches us to love what doesn't cost much, to love the sunrise and the sunset and the beating of the rain on roof and windows, or the gentle fall of snow on a winter day. And it went on to say that a good education teaches us to love life for its own sake. And that's what I'd realized that morning when I woke up before the alarm sounded. Being alive, just being alive, makes us winners. From then on, anything we want to add to the achievement is up to us. It needn't be a lot in the eyes of the world, but we can find our place in the scheme of things and do our thing, make our contribution, whatever it happens to be. One morning recently, Diana and I were in Hawaii. It was 5 o'clock and still pitch dark, but the sky was clear and filled with stars. We put on our bathing suits and walked out into the water until it was up to our shoulders. And we put our arms around each other and drank in the clean, warm breeze and luxuriated in the sea, now warm to our bodies. And as we watched, the sky in the east grew softly lighter until the great craggy old volcanic mountains were clearly outlined against the early morning sky. What a joy it was. What a joy it is, just to be alive. Now let me conclude with that great advice from Henry Thoreau. If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. Thank you.